Good evening, everyone. That was my fault. Counselor Anderson. Good? Nope. All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, November 2nd. We are meeting this evening on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Hasqualwin, Queesluknook, Laskaholmish, Okmayo. Council, a motion to adopt the agenda that's before us, moved by Councilor Hereford, seconded by Councilor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any notice of motion? Seeing none, we don't have any delegations, petitions, or proclamations this evening. Consideration of unscheduled public attendance. This is anyone here tonight that would like to speak to an issue not on the agenda and feels that it cannot wait for 2 weeks to our next regular business meeting. That would also apply to anyone online. Okay. No public hearings this evening, although under item 7, we do have a couple of timed items. So I will turn it over to staff to present development permit with variance for the University Heights Multifamily Lot A. Welcome.
Thank you for your patience. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning. I'm here tonight to present development permit number 555. Subject property is a vacant lot located on University Boulevard in the University Heights subdivision, just east of the bridge over the Masheter Creek. This is the second multifamily development application at the University Heights subdivision. The lot is currently undeveloped with a trail providing access to the adjacent park running through the site and the Ring Creek Falls Trail running through the western portion of the property. Currently, there are no public access right-of-ways secured on the property. The 8,110 square meter site is zoned University Housing 1. Neighboring properties to the south and east are zoned UH1 and developed with single detached dwellings. The property to the north is part of the Quest University campus lands and zoned University Campus 1. This DP application seeks to allow for the construction of 10 townhomes. Each unit provides 3 bedrooms and are roughly 160 square meters. The development is accessed off University Boulevard. Vehicle parking for the development meets the zoning bylaw requirements. Each unit has a separate garage, providing the required 2 parking spaces. The required 3 visitor parking stalls are provided along the drive aisle. Bicycle parking is provided in the garages. The building's form and character include materials and forms that are varied but balanced to avoid monotony. Cladding materials on the exterior take their cue from surrounding vistas of Douglas fir forests and the dominant granite colors of the Squamish Chief. Black, grays, white, and subtle tones will show little weathering over time and provide a relatively maintenance-free exterior for the strata to manage. The sawtooth roofline is intentionally repetitive, mimicking mountain peak forms and offering light and view spacing between each unit. The roofline helps delineate each individual townhouse unit, and a similar strategy was carried forward onto the front facades. The development is exceeding the 400 square meter open space requirement by providing shared open space on the east side of the property behind the units. Semi-private open space is provided in the form of private patio areas behind each unit. Landscape plantings are low maintenance and a mix of native and adaptive species. The shared open space and private outdoor space are delineated by low hedging. The existing trees along the northeast portion of the property fronting University Boulevard will be maintained. The proponents intend to maintain public access through the site by providing a 1.8 meter wide sidewalk, which is separated from the drive aisle by a curb. This will provide pedestrians separated access from the drive aisle through the site. The proposed drive aisle width is 6.5 meters. A statutory right-of-way providing public access over the sidewalk path area and for the Ring Creek Trail has been offered by the proponent. Currently, there are no public access right-of-ways secured on the property. The Ring Creek Trail will not be affected by the development. The development is requesting a variance to the front setback from 7.62 meters to 3 meters to allow for a shared waste enclosure. The original application also requested a variance to the side yard setback. However, the location of the building was shifted so that this variance is no longer required. Staff are supportive of the front setback variance request, as this is the most practical location for a garbage truck to access the shared waste room on the site, and the existing trees that are being retained adjacent to the proposed waste room will provide screening from University Boulevard. The proponents are also offering to construct overhead weather protection over some seating in the adjacent park. This will allow for functional use of this space in the rain for the entire neighborhood and will allow for the project to meet Section 36.14D of the Development Permit Area Guidelines, which requires outdoor amenity space to include areas with overhead weather protection to enable functional use of the site in the rain. Staff are supportive of this proposal, as providing the covered outdoor space at the park instead of on-site will allow for its use by the general public. This slide shows shows the location of the proposed covered outdoor space. The project was posted to the district's development showcase. 18 comments have been received, including 3 requests for a public information meeting. 7 of the comments came from 2 individuals. A public information meeting was not held as the minimum 10 requests were not received within the first 21 days the project was posted on the development showcase. Comments generally noted concern regarding the preservation of the trails through the site, concerns related to firefighter access, parking, and traffic. Notification of the development variances was included with this application, and notices were sent to properties within 100 meters of the subject property. Staff recommend that the District of Squamish authorize development permit number 555, subject to the registration of statutory right-of-ways for public access over the Ring Creek Trail, the proposed sidewalk through the subdivision, a commitment from the proponent that any equipment integral for the heating of the building or hot water system will use a renewable energy source, and that no gas fireplaces will be provided in any units, and that a variance to the front setback from 7.62 meters to 3 meters for shared waste enclosures only be approved, subject to a commitment from the proponent to construct a covered structure and bonding provided for this work be provided with the servicing agreement subject to development permit or servicing agreement associated with development permit number 555. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Daly? Councilor French.
Thanks, Mayor. The landowner is offering to put overhead weather protection above the seating, as you mentioned, in the park area near the development. Just wondering if you could expand on this a bit more. Will the roof be constructed of what materials? Will it just cover the bench seats area? Can you tell us how large the roof area will be?
Through the mayor, the design has not yet been finalized at this time. However, in initial discussions with the proponent, it will likely cover half of that area. Oh, I can't bring it back up at this moment, but there's the seat, so it'll likely cover the seating portion and then still allow for pedestrians to pass through this area. But the design has not been finalized at this time.
And I'm also curious about timing. Will the work in the park be completed before construction begins of the main development, or after it's completed, or somewhere in between?
The intention is for this work to be completed through the servicing agreement. So it will likely be undertaken at the same time the construction of the development. So the servicing agreements typically cover offsite construction, so it should happen at the same time.
Thanks, Mayor.
Councilor Rice.
Thank you. You mentioned a shared area, which I'm looking at a picture of the overhead. And is that the green space we're talking about just behind the building, sort of a teardrop space?
That's correct.
And when you say shared, is that shared amongst the various owners or is that shared with the public?
That's shared amongst the various owners.
Shared common area.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Herford.
Thank you. I'd like to dig into the access through the site. So there's no, in your presentation, you mentioned there's no formal access at this point, even though so everything there has been sort of tolerated till this point. Okay, so then This development will allow passage through this site, and then it would connect to the park. Is that right? There's no other barrier, so then there'll be sort of smooth connectivity through there.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the trail that's further downhill, will that access be formalized across this? I don't know that that area is good for much else, but is that part of the formalization or just the sidewalk
The Ring Creek Falls Trail that passes through the subject property is also going to be granted a statutory right of way.
Okay, and then will access through the site be possible during the construction phase? And has that been discussed at any point?
That has not been discussed at this time, but is unlikely that it will be maintained during or through the duration of construction. Pedestrians will likely have to use the sidewalk on University Boulevard and maybe go around during portions of construction, but that hasn't been finalized at this time.
Thank you. Just given that there's a couple options of ways to get through there, it'd be great if one of them was available sort of throughout, if possible. I don't know, any suggestions on how we capture that, or if that's a possibility. I do see that Ring Creek Falls Trail being fairly removed from these works, so I have some cautious optimism there.
That may be an option. I don't believe the construction will likely impact that, but I might defer to my director to see if he has anything to add.
For you, Chair, I think council could include a motion, one of the subject tos for the variance that subject to the applicant exploring with staff all possible options to maintain access during construction. And this way it will commit the applicant to working with us. There may be some very practical reasons why we won't find a way so temporarily access could disappear, but we will explore all options.
Yeah, other questions? Mr. Daly, what provides the privacy between the units at the back?
There are some trees planted between the units, and then there's some low hedging that separates the units and the shared outdoor space. And there are also some shed units. Some are attached to the building, and one is detached at the southernmost portion. But that's kind of a shed area for the residents.
So there isn't sort of a wall or a divider between my little backyard and my neighbor's backyard or terrace?
That's correct. It's sort of staggered. Where there's a shed unit, it provides kind of a shed unit for each, and then there's a tree in between, and then a shed unit afterwards, if that makes sense.
And are the mailboxes located near the garbage?
Yes, I believe so, though I'm not sure it's noted on the drawings.
And then from above, it looks like there's quite a bit of distance that these townhomes are not encroaching on the view of the neighbors above.
That's correct. I believe there should be minimal impact on the views from the neighbors.
Do we have a study, or can we confirm that?
A view study was not requested. However, the height of the buildings is 3 stories, and I believe the retaining walls on the adjacent properties are almost the height of the buildings. However, a study was not commissioned, so I can't say with certainty.
Any other hands? Go ahead, Councillor Anderson, and then I'll go to the public.
Mr. Daly, I'm reviewing the letter from Calvin Winter regarding the steep slope and the setback consideration for firefighting, search and rescue, and emergency services. And I'm wondering if you may be able to help me understand how we would review this consideration. Is it through the subdivision and development control bylaw? What is our lens for reviewing this issue of ensuring appropriate conditions for firefighting, search and rescue, and emergency services.
Through the mayor, each development permit application is referred to the fire department for comment at the initial referral stage. So they get a package with the drawings and are allowed to make comments. And then firefighter provisions or firefighting provisions are also considered as part of the BC building code. So staff send out the referral, and then fire provides comments and concerns related to that. And there were no concerns noted for this development in related to access for firefighting or things like that.
Not seeing any other hands from council at this moment. We will go out to the public. So the proponent and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard electronically, via telephone, or from your computer, or in person from council chambers at Municipal Hall with respect to the proposed variances to the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200/2011. The proposed variances to the zoning bylaw and the proposed variances the proposed variances to the zoning bylaw are outlined in the staff report. This is section 21.7D, minimum setbacks for principal buildings for townhouse and apartment buildings, front setback from 7.62 meters to 3.0 meters for the shared waste enclosure only. Speakers are limited to speaking only to the variance. This is not a rezoning application, so you must limit your comments to the setback variance. Please note that limited in-person participation is available from council chambers in Municipal Hall. If you're participating in person, please raise your hand when it's your turn to speak. If there are speakers both electronically and in person, I will just alternate. Details to participate via telephone or WebEx are as follows. In order to get on the speakers list, if you're on the phone, you raise your hand by dialing *3, or if you're on WebEx, you open the participant panel and you click on the hand icon. When you're done speaking, you just have to remember to hit *3 again to put your hand down if you're on the phone, and also on WebEx, hit the hand icon to lower your hand. When it's your turn to speak, if you're participating electronically, you will receive a voice prompt via telephone or a dialog box via WebEx. Please commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address or neighborhood. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. If you experience technical difficulties, please use the chat function to send the host a message or email hearing@squamish.ca. So I will first go to members of the public in City Hall. Is there someone who'd like to speak? I can confirm that you may only speak to the variances. So the question is, if they have other concerns, where could they forward them, and would they have any effect from this point on? Maybe I'll put that over to staff to answer that question.
Concerns can be submitted in writing. I'd be happy to give you my email contact following this meeting or right now. However, the development has made its way through the process and is being considered by council at this point. So I think depending on the nature of the comments, there may be some opportunity to address them, but there also may not be, depending on what those concerns are.
I'll go to our moderator. Is there anyone online that wishes to speak?
Not at this time, Mayor Elliott.
Is there someone in the audience who wishes to speak to this? Go ahead, sir. Come to the podium. You'll just have to click the mic on and just begin by stating your name and either your address or neighborhood.
Can I take off my mask or here? Or no?
Yes, you may take your mask off once you're at the podium.
Thank you so much, Mayor and Council. My name is Dr. Adam Kendall, and I have an opposition to the variance on decreasing the front yard setback from 7.62 meters to 3 meters, as I feel that this is an inappropriate use of the space and the densification within that. This is a very tight development, and specifically at that north aspect of the development. It's right beside the road. And this is a very popular walkway and trail use of which my children, my neighbor's children, Rob, and about 30 children walk to the Garibaldi Highlands through the park and will end up at the juncture where the crosswalk, where the variance, where the garbage trucks that come to the pickup location will have to turn around. There's only proposed to be a small curb which separates the driveway from the walkway before we enter over the bridge over the Masheter Creek. So therefore, I think it's a very congested area, which is inappropriate for obtaining this variance. One question that I had was whether there was a formal traffic study that was done, because the garbage trucks that come in to pick up the garbage from that area are going to have to come back in, back up on a 3-point turn, and then try and get ingress and egress to University Boulevard. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that area or has walked the area, but the speed of the traffic that comes over the bridge, up the hill into the University Heights is a significant concern. And similarly, the speed of the vehicles coming down the hill is a significant concern for service vehicles to come in and out to that common garbage collection spot. A question that I have that I listened in on all the ADP meetings before this proposal. We did not have a chance to comment at that point, but they did not, I believe, in my opinion, address the traffic concerns. And that is one of the major concerns for this whole development. The other concerns, and you addressed this specifically, was whether there was any comments or a view study. Now, I know that I own lot 14, which is right above the closest, most impacted to unit 10, which is at the south aspect of the development. My view will be directly affected. I know that that is not a legal, that cannot be taken into consideration on variances, but I do believe that privacy, as well as the issue of overlooking, is an issue that has to be considered. Basically, I will be looking 14 feet from my backyard at the fence, and I will be looking directly into the bedroom on the 3rd floor and into the kitchen. Their bedroom and their kitchen will be looking into my basement, where my wife's office and my legal suite is down below. So those are other issues. Most importantly,
Can you stick to the variance? Sorry, I've given you some leeway.
Most
So
importantly, I think the traffic at the north aspect of the proposal, which is directly affected by the variance, should not be allowed. There are several other issues related to that, but I understand that you didn't want us to explore the rest of the very significant issues at this point. So I'd beg that the council take that into consideration when they're making their decision on passing this through. Thank you.
I'll go to our moderator. Is there anyone online who wishes to speak? That is *3 on the telephone, or on the participant panel, raising your hand.
No hands, Mayor Elliott.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I'd like to just understand this, the layout here on Mr. Daly. I don't know if you have the same. It's page 27 of 235 of our agenda, but I think it's page 5 of the development. Is the one that shows, the only one that really shows the road. And while you're looking for that, I'll also say that I appreciated some of the renderings of this that actually showed the development in rain, which was an interesting perspective that that we should get, but we don't always get. But all joking aside, when I go to our GIS and I look at this, the property lines and everything involved in this, I feel like we're still a ways back from the road. Is it our road right of way? Is there another property in between? Because this does look to be larger than that minimum setback that we're discussing from the property line. And do you understand my okay? That's a rambling question, but I hope you got where I'm going.
Through the mayor, yes, there is a separate private parcel in between the road and this development site. During the subdivision process, the access to the road was in a bit of a strange location. So the proponent has secured a right of way for access on that private property. So it is further set their front property line, which is where the 7.62 meter setback starts from, is well away from the street.
And do you have a number for that, just so I can relate it to the road or the multi-use path or whatever's?
I can get it on our GIS if you allow me a moment. I can get an approximate number.
I have it, Brian, if I may. So it looks like from the sidewalk to the property line, it's about 20 meters.
Okay, and then thank you. And in the same drawing, it shows some markings on the road, and it just makes me think of this access in and out of this. Is there any other works to be done to formalize that access, whether it's road markings? I don't know if there's enough room for a turn lane or what else. Is there anything else planned for that piece? Because it doesn't strike me as just being able to put a little drop down in. And what's to happen there?
That has not been finalized at this time. That those detailed designs will happen at the servicing agreement stage. So following development permit approval, that will be reviewed with the engineering department, and they will finalize those designs.
Go ahead, Councillor Herford, and then I've got Councillor Pangam.
And is that where the engineering department would look at that and then decide based on traffic flow in the area what's appropriate works to request there? Is that the normal flow?
That's correct.
It would strike me as an interesting floating variable to leave there, given that there are some safety concerns from the neighborhood, and the work needed to sort of, in my experience, to mitigate those safety concerns from time to time ends up being substantial. So I'm just curious how we're all to feel comfortable leaving it to that point to understand what's happening there. So I'll just sort of leave that. Or
if I may, through the mayor, often when there's variances involved with development applications, given the level of uncertainty around the approvals, developers can be hesitant to go down detailed design drawings for civil works and things like that when there is a high level of uncertainty whether the development permit will be approved.
Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, thanks. Just wondering, I gather that off the boulevard, it'll be sort of a dead end strata road, I assume, to this development. Are there any plans or even possibility to eventually connect it to some of the other roads to the south as more development happens?
Through the mayor, no, there is dedicated parkland south of this. So that is dedicated district parkland.
Mr. Daly, did the ADP discuss sort of, there's no driveways, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and is there a turnaround at the south end?
No, there is not.
I'm talking to staff, but thank you. And so but there's enough, so the visitor parking, they'll have to pull in and then do a UE somewhere in the drive aisle to exit. And we feel that is okay?
Yes, there should be sufficient room. Like there aren't I would not say a substantial driveway, but there is enough area in front of the garages that should allow for a turnaround. There's a 6.5 meter width drive aisle to basically not quite the front building face of the building. There's also a dedicated, it's not a visitor parking stall adjacent to the waste room, but there is a lay-by space that is intended to be used for maintenance for the strata and for public works, as there are some utility right-of-ways through this property. So that would also provide an opportunity for a turnaround.
And when do we require developers to do that sort of the renderings from what it looks like from neighboring properties? I sort of expected to see that in the drawings, given the slope of the area and how it interfaces with the neighborhood behind it.
Renderings were requested for this project and included in the staff presentation. They weren't included in the staff report, which I will note as a miss on my part. But I guess it depends on development to development. On smaller developments, they're not always required, especially one of this size. But I did request renderings to try and show the interface with the neighboring properties, and that should have been included in the staff report.
Did you show them tonight? And I missed it?
There was one on the form and character slide that I showed, but it was very brief, and that is a good note for future presentations that I'll make sure to highlight it more.
Can you put that back up for me?
It will take me a moment, I apologize.
That's okay. We've got all night.
So this is an initial one that you can't really see the adjacent properties that well, but the buildings are there. And then just allow me to. This is another rendering. Also not, it's attempting to show the buildings behind, but obviously they're quite a bit higher. A rendering from the sort of the northeast corner, I suppose it would call it. It was just showing the existing trees, so it was hard to kind of visualize everything. And then I did not include the rendering from the park in this presentation.
But do you have it?
I can pull it up.
I just want to get a sense from the other side of how this interfaces with the neighborhood. So I know sometimes you guys have extra slides in your back pocket. So if you've got it.
Unfortunately, I don't have the extra slide in here. I would have to pull it up, but if you'd like to do that, I can do that while members of the public speak or something.
Moderator, is there anyone online that wishes to speak?
Not at this time, Mayor Elliott.
Is there a member of the audience that wishes to speak to the variance this evening? Are you going to speak to the variance? All right. I'll give you 5 minutes to try and speak to the variance. Just start by stating your name and your address or neighborhood, please.
Okay, my name's Robert Keir, and address is the Crescent. Neighbour to Adam. So there's 4 points I wanted to come up with tonight, and I'm gonna probably get away with 2. So we'll see how we go.
Sounds like a challenge, but I'll take it on.
We'll see how we go. All right, and I'm just going to read from a letter that I'm hopefully going to submit later on this evening, guys, if that's okay. So I walk this beautiful school route daily with my 4-year-old, along with 30 other parents and children that I am aware of. That number is increasing, and once the development to the south is finally completed, there will be significantly more parents doing the same thing along the same route. This parcel of land under review for development is a haven for mountain bikers, hikers, e-bikers, scooters, older generation gentle walks, etc., etc. The proposed mitigation for altering the pavement has not fully considered the implications of current use and how they will inexorably convert if the development goes ahead, in my opinion. For the foreseeable future, you are now asking parents to walk their children to school along an improvised sidewalk, a lower pathway that necessitates a huge detour, or walk up to the Quest University Crescent T-junction in brackets, a notoriously dangerous turning point for cars, let alone pedestrians. If you've ever driven it, you take your life into your hands by coming out onto the boulevard. I promise you do. The existing crosswalk under a new proposal will be moved east up the hill, and as such increases the danger significantly, in my opinion, also, as it's now positioned closer towards the blind bend. We're already stopping our kids in the morning, stepping out onto that crosswalk, and I have caught myself grabbing my kid back because people are going to stop, they're not going to stop. The trucks that are coming down there weighted with construction materials at the moment, they take some stopping. And you're now pushing it closer towards that steep hill and that blind bend.
And that's related to the setback?
Because the garbage trucks going in, they're not going to go in there in 2 seconds because, I mean, and I'll go back to the point again in a second about the traffic design. So the existing crosswalk and the new proposal will be moved up the hill. So it's now positioned closer towards the blind bend, as I've said. I formally ask again that have the district undertaken a comprehensive appraisal of this potentially safety concern and have all risks been mitigated prudently. Traffic design proposal. Okay, I'm very concerned with regard to the proposed development traffic implications. Specifically, I would like to know if a fully established transportation design report has considered the litany of risk implications regarding the entrance to the development. As parents of the children walking to school on a daily basis, we're glaringly witness to the increasing and at times scary traffic scenarios on that blind S-bend. When you fully consider that, and I have considered this, there will be upwards of 30,000 vehicular interactions at that junction per year. It's not a matter of if, but when there's going to be an accident, in my opinion. Please take this point as a formal request to fully investigate the mitigations you have used to justify an entrance at this point before rubber stamping the development as approved. Please. One final one, you're probably going to stop me, but I'm a really passionate photography enthusiast and wildlife enthusiast, guys, okay? The fact that the district or district's representatives have not designated the development parcel of land as environmentally sensitive is verging on laughable. As a photography, if you look at that environmentally sensitive area, yeah, it's just fallen short for some reason, goodness knows why, in your green hashed area of where this development land is. As I say, as a photography enthusiast, I watch with a great deal of interest the comings and goings of black bears, coyotes, white-tailed deer, hares, eagles, rare owls, and turkey vultures.
Okay.
I do. And all of this, variance or not, is going to be massively affected by this parcel of land because it's periodically a well-established wildlife corridor along the banks of the Mashita. It really is. The wildlife uses this corridor as the riverbanks are too steep and it's become the easiest access to the Mamquam estuary where the majority of food sources are. Please take this point as a formal request to re-evaluate the environmental impact that this is going to cause on our wildlife. What you're doing is you're funneling parents and children into one pathway, and you're now funneling wildlife into an even narrower pathway. That is a great piece of land for wildlife and for people to enjoy. Yes, we're not allowed to use it, but my God, we enjoy using it.
Thank you.
So this is the rendering of the development from the park.
Mr. Daly, can you just describe what I can see there? I can see some steps going up. And do you have a sense of where the property lines are?
So the property lines would be essentially the retaining structure at the back. Oh, you can see my cursor. That would be halfway to the rear property line. It's difficult to tell from these renderings. The property line adjacent to the park would be right here where you can see the pavement starting. And then this is the path through the park connecting with the sidewalk that is proposed through the drive aisle of the development.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to pull that up. Council, any other questions? Councilor Herford?
Thank you. This point of sort of people unfamiliar with say the visitors coming for the first time to visit their friends in their new place, they pull in, they get down the end, there's nowhere to turn around. Is it that close? Is there room at the other end to have that lay-by for the maintenance vehicle function as a turnaround? I know the drive aisle seems to be enough space, but you're in an unfamiliar space with probably bikes hanging off the back of your pickup truck, and you're trying to do an Austin Powers in there. Is there a way to get that room at another part of the property?
I don't believe it is possible to put it at the south end of the development, given the retaining that is required in that area. There's also a riparian covenant that comes up right to kind of the southwest portion of the property. So to just maybe also address the comment from the member of the public who just spoke, a development permit for protection of the environment was done initially for this subdivision application that created all of the parcels. It established a covenant area for riparian protection. A portion of that comes very close to the proposed drive aisle and sidewalk through this site, which is one of the reasons why it's so constrained. If there's no development proposed within that covenant area, it is exempt from development permit area 1, and a report from a qualified environmental professional was provided with this application that noted that there would be no impacts on that covenant area. So it is not possible to locate the lay-by down at the other end. It's too tight in that location.
And I'm curious, I know there's a lot of foot and bicycle traffic and other modes of travel probably through here. I see some value in formalizing that with sidewalk, but I'd expect something more along the lines, and I expect with the volume through here, something more along the lines of a multi-use path as far as a width. So where does this, where does the width of this lie in that, given their, as proposed?
Staff were working with the proponent to try and provide an access that was as wide as possible, or a multi-use path that was as wide as possible, and this was as wide as was determined was possible. Obviously, we'd always like to go wider, but without impacting the drive aisle and requiring substantially more retaining to the west and impacting that covenanted riparian area. Staff felt this was a reasonable trade-off and an acceptable width to accept for as a path through the site.
And what is that?
1.8 meters.
And thank you. And then in this drawing here, I know there's a ways to go in this process, but the sidewalk ends at the property line and the driveway continues out to the road. And I was thinking that doesn't quite jive with me. Is that, where does that piece sit?
The landscape drawings correctly show the sidewalk tying into the existing sidewalk along the University Boulevard. The architectural drawings just showed the development to the property line.
I see your hand, sir. Are you going to speak to the variance? I can't. I'm sorry. That's up to council to ask those questions on the DP, and the public can speak to the variance. And I've tried to provide as much leeway there as possible. So I'm gonna. Thank you. Okay, council, any questions related to this DP? Council Pango.
Sorry, just trying to follow the conversation and the rendering. So on page 3, I guess, of our report, or page 11 of our agenda, it's the architectural drawing with the rain and the cyclist. Just want to make sure I understand. So there's no sidewalk visible, but we're saying the sidewalk is along the sort of green treed edge. And then there's a 6.5 meter between the sidewalk and the front of the buildings. Is that?
That's correct. The rendering that I believe is in the agenda package was one of the original ones before the sidewalk, the separated sidewalk was contemplated. It would be located roughly in the yellow. You see a yellow line in that rendering that is essentially delineating where the sidewalk is going.
Mr. Daly, can you confirm where the crosswalk is now and where it is being moved to?
The crosswalk is currently located where the proposed new driveway will be, and it is going to be relocated further to the east, so towards the university, further up University Boulevard. The intention is to have the drive aisle be located where the current sidewalk is, and then the crosswalk will be moved to the east.
And is it possible to require a flashing light there?
I might have to defer this question to my director or to my general manager.
Through the chair, probably not, given we'd have to look at the subdivision development control bylaw, but my guess is probably not. That would be our requirement to do that as the district, not the developers. He's not, that this is not creating sufficient impact, both in terms of traffic movement or pedestrian movements, that would warrant that sort of change in crossing condition.
I guess my question is, given the fact that there's sidewalks on this side and further down the road, a crosswalk over to the school with a flashing beacon, why are we putting a crosswalk there?
I believe the crosswalk is already there.
And why are we maintaining it? I guess is why I'm asking.
I mean, should we remove it?
Yeah, why there? Because just down the road, there's the roundabout and there's appropriate places for pedestrians to cross. Why do we want them to cross on the downslope of University Boulevard before a bridge? Because they can access sidewalks on both sides.
Correct. I think the reason that it's probably there, and I'm guessing, is that for the inbound traffic on the north side of the bridge, it's a way for them, the sidewalk on that side of the road ceases at that point. So it's for them to get over from that point to the sidewalk on the other side because it doesn't continue on. That would be the only reason that I would guess it's there. We would remove it, but then the folks inbound on the north side of the bridge are sort of landlocked at that point.
All right. Council, any further questions? Council Race.
Thank you. The property between the development and the road, which you said was a separate property, is that a potential building lot? Is that zoned for residential?
It is zoned university campus on, and it is not sufficient. It is not buildable based on required setbacks of the zoning.
Thank you.
All right, I'll go one last time to see if there's anyone online, *3, or raise your hand in the participant panel.
There is no one.
One last time to the audience here at Municipal Hall to speak to the variances. All right, seeing none. There is a staff recommendation to authorize the development permit. There are some subject twos, which is the registration of statutory right-of-way for public access over the Ring Creek Trail, statutory right-of-way for public access over the proposed sidewalk adjacent to the drive aisle, commitment from the proponent that any equipment integral for heating of the building or hot water system will be renewable energy source. And that the variance be included. Councilor Herfer, you raised an issue that you might want to add to that, but that's what's sitting in our agenda. So Council, what is your desire this evening? Councilor French.
I'd propose to move the staff recommendation with an additional subject IV4 that I think Mr. Valaniskas could provide the wording for. He already shared some thoughts on wording that essentially would maintain trail access through safe trail access or sidewalk access through the development during the construction period.
Mr. Valaniskas, do you want to propose some wording?
Yes, I think what I suggested was that the applicants work with staff to explore all possible ways to maintain access, just in case it is impossible.
That would be my motion.
Is there a seconder for this motion? Seconded by Councillor Race.
No, could
No,
you just
okay.
please read the last part, how it ended up?
Can we have that read back, Ms. Pollock?
That the applicants work with staff to explore all possible ways to maintain access.
Do you want to read that in full then, Ms. Pollock?
That the applicants work with staff to explore all possible ways to maintain access through the site during construction.
Councillor Race?
Well, I'll second it if the word reasonable steps. All possible could mean a lot of different things. So the word reasonable goes in there. I can second that.
That works for me.
Okay, have we added that, Ms. Pollock? All right.
So if I might, just to be clear, could we read it in the final form then, please?
That the applicants work with staff to explore all reasonable ways to maintain access through the site during construction.
Thank you. I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Comments, Councillor French?
Thanks, Mayor. I support the variance requested by the developer and a variance that's supported by district staff. The variance for the waste enclosure makes sense to me. The variance, in my mind, won't negatively impact the existing residences. And the plan to relocate the existing crushed gravel trail through the property will guarantee public access through the property. And as we've just noted, including during construction, from the boulevard to the existing playground and park area. I used to live in this area. I know it extremely well and spent a lot of time at this spot. This townhouse development on land zoned for this housing form will help to further address the need for more housing in our community. I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Race.
Thank you. And first of all, with respect to the variance, I don't have a problem with the variance. And I think there was some confusion in some of the correspondence where the setback might be reduced, and it is not close to a steep slope. It is, from all the drawings and renderings, a relatively flat area, and it is not adjacent to a building or a future building, apparently. There is really nothing between the buildings that would comprise this development and the road, which is an area of somewhere around 60 to 70 feet, 20 odd meters, I think Mr. Velanishka said. So there's ample shielding. I don't think it'll have any impact on the public. And it does make sense to have that pickup and servicing done right at the entrance to the development as opposed to a spot farther down. So I would support the variances. With respect to the rest of the comments and the rest of the development, this is not a rezoning, of course. This is a development permit. And so a lot of the comments and some of the correspondence were really directed to what might happen on a rezoning. But this property, to my knowledge, has been rezoned for a long time, I think since the rest of the development up above it was zoned. And so a lot of those considerations were taken into account when that property was rezoned, and we're not here and don't have the ability to go back and change any of that. Things, trail connections, for example, this is private property. We have to remember that. This is not trail across public land. And usually with developers who have private property that they're developing that have trails running through them that have just been made by the public, usually what we try to get is connections through the property so that the coming up to the property and leaving the property connect to the trail system that is sort of become ad hoc and in place. And that's what this development does in my view. It is a constrained site in some ways. 1.8 meters should be sufficient, I think, if people are using it safely. And so I think the developer has taken reasonable steps to provide that, along with other concessions, actually. You'd have to call them concessions to kind of meet some of our current goals, particularly around heating and so forth. So all in all, I'm prepared to support this motion. I think this will be habitable and I think an attractive development.
Other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Herford, and then Councillor Anderson.
I'll be reluctantly supporting the variance, and I understand the site constraints here. Given the zoning, my concern is if this was to be sent away, they come back with something that doesn't look much different and doesn't require this variance, and then the formalized access through the site and the other I think that's extremely valuable, actually. The formalized access through the site. The variance itself, due to the interesting, for lack of a better word, property lines and the situation there, it still well exceeds the regulation for setback if you look at it from the road. So I think effectively it would have no negative impact on its own. As to the rest, it does fit the zoning for the area, and with that variance aside, they could come and we would need, and the other pieces wouldn't necessarily be part of the package. So sort of all those things taken on balance, I'll be supporting this one this time.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I will be supporting the staff recommendation regarding the variances. My colleagues have spoken to the public access and trail issue. I have little to add to that. I'll offer some more general comments. Regarding privacy, it is between the units above and below and between them. It is difficult to assess whether landscaping might be a solution in future. And I do appreciate Mr. Daly taking note of the need for good quality renderings for council to have a better informed and nuanced picture of this. But I don't have any other suggestion as to other than perhaps landscaping may be a solution. My biggest concern is the safety at the intersection with the University Boulevard. And I'm trying to think of other examples around the community of circumstances like this, and there may be some, but we may need to be monitoring this. Interesting conversation regarding the crosswalks. But there is high-speed vehicles here in the blind S-bend, and so this may be something that may need to be reviewed in future with respect to speed on University Boulevard. I'd like to speak to the matter of colors, and I know this is a perennial topic for me. Maybe this hillside, its environment, and the vistas could use some more vibrant color, at least in the accents or trims of the building. Inasmuch as the choice of cladding material colors may be prompted by our DPA guidelines, and it may not be, as there appears to be a holistic concept reflected in the architect's work, we should look into reviewing these guidelines in future. Finally, I'd like to appreciate the initiative of our public input correspondents and our presenters here this evening. They presented information and insights that will be useful for us in future. We're going to be seeing more likely development on steeper slopes and on the hillsides, and we're going to have to learn how to do it. We're going to learn as we go. Hopefully we won't be making serious mistakes, but this is an exercise in a journey, and I appreciate the input received and very careful comments and illustrations that have been provided to us. That's my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Benga.
Yeah, I'm going to be supporting this. The variance itself seems reasonable and not the primary point of contention. When I look at the general development in the area and above that's approved as part of setting up the university and so on, the 10 units here do not, in my mind, relatively speaking, significantly add to population or traffic. I think, with a school zone directly to the west and then a university just above, I think in my mind, some of the conversations we've already been having about speeds and so on our streets and street design to bring down speeds is where the solution needs to happen. I think I appreciate the addition of public access legitimized and maintained through the site. The drive through the site itself does seem a bit constrained with 10 units, though I see that mostly as an issue for the development itself. And, following my general trend, I think, of not wanting to dedicate a lot of space to cars, part of me is actually glad to see that. It may be a bit tight for people who try to have vehicles in these homes, but at the end of the day, I think that makes sense with the raised sidewalk that provides some level of separation for pedestrians and so on. And it's not a perfect site, but I think overall reasonable concessions have been made. And so I do think this does point out the need for us to think about traffic calming along the boulevard. But I'm not sure that gets solved by this site. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's a lot to like about this DP. I think the variance is supportable. But I'm not going to support it. And it has to do with the area at the south. And I think there is one townhome too many on this site. And the interface to the park makes no sense to me. You basically walk right up to someone's front door from the park. And I feel like there should be a setback from that. And so in the DPA 3 guidelines, it talks about the siting, massing, and heights of multi-story buildings should be, no, not that one. Yes, should minimize view and solar impacts on adjacent developments, open spaces, and streets. And so while there's not really view and solar impacts, it doesn't make sense to me that there's no buffer between the end of the park and the first townhome. And there's not a lot of breathing room for the residents here to, for those that have larger work trucks that don't fit in garages. Where do those go? Maybe they just shouldn't live there. But also the lack of turnaround or just some additional space for a bike wash area that could be shared or some shared garden space. Just some sort of buffer from the park that doesn't land you sort of right in someone's driveway. So I think it's for that reason that I feel like too much is going on this site in this DP. I don't mind the variance, and while I hear concerns about garbage trucks, they come once a week and usually not during school travel times. So, in my multifamily development, they do come in and make 3-point turns right in our areas, and that's crazy because we all have our own bins. So I definitely support going in the direction of having just one pickup point. But I think, it's important to think of the livability when we're putting in multifamily, and the interface to the park to me just doesn't make sense. And I would have had liked the ADP to think that through a little bit more clearly. So for that reason, I'm not going to support it. So I will call the question. Any opposed? Mayor Elliott opposes. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Daly. All right, so next up, we have another development variance permit, this time for 38439 Buckley Avenue. And Mr. Prahalad is here this evening for this one.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Rish Prahalad, planner with the Community Planning Department. Tonight, I will be presenting DVP 01 located at 38439 Buckley Avenue, which is requesting 2 variances. The subject property is a uniquely shaped triangle lot at 38349 Buckley Avenue in the Wilson Crescent neighborhood, across from Howe Sound Secondary School, and is currently developed with a single detached dwelling unit, which does not meet the current required front and rear yard setbacks. The property is zoned RM1 multifamily residential, and the OCP land use designation is residential neighborhood. The majority of the neighborhood is zoned RM1, with a few parcels zoned RS3. The application seeks to permit the construction of a new compact 2-unit rental dwelling while retaining the existing single detached dwelling unit on the property. The new 2-unit dwelling will be a rental building secured through a housing market rental covenant registered on title. Building up to the setbacks would result in a smaller buildable area and the loss of 2 covered parking spots. The rooftop decks and patios will allow for private outdoor spaces for both dwelling units in the duplexes. This development permit would typically be delegated. However, the application is also proposing a zoning variance requiring council's approval. The proponent is seeking 2 variances to section 10.6 of the zoning bylaw. The proponent is requesting a reduction in the rear yard setback from 9.15 meters to 5 meters, and a reduction in the interior side yard setback from 4.57 meters to 3 meters. Staff are supportive of the variance request, as the variances would facilitate the construction of a 2-unit dwelling with rental tenure, as well as a rooftop deck and private patios for both units. Given the unique shape of the lot, a variance would be required for any 2-unit dwelling being built on the property. The Wilson Crescent neighborhood has been zoned RM1 for several decades. However, under the current zoning bylaw, single-unit dwellings are no longer permitted in the RM1 zone. The majority of the RM1 zone parcels contain single-unit dwellings. However, a broader mix of infill housing types is supported in this neighborhood. This application is in line with the Wilson Crescent microplan, as there is a demonstrated need for the variances to permit a reasonable use of the property. The variances will result in a development that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, while adding a unique mix of housing and additional density to the neighborhood. DVP 01 was posted to the district's development showcase, and a development sign was installed on the property. No request for a public information hearing was received, and no public information meeting was held. Variances were sent out to residents within 100 meters of the property, and no comments was received for the project. Staff recommend that the District of Squamish authorize the issuance of development permit DVP 01 as presented for the property located at 38439 Buckley Avenue, subject to a housing market rental agreement and a no gas covenant, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute DVP 01. Alternatively, council could not authorize the development variance permit or refer this back to staff. Thank you. At this time, I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Prahalad. Council, any questions? They're thinking. Go ahead, Councilor Race.
I was thinking. So on the diagram that's got the red triangle on it, if I read this correctly, it's the existing house that encroaches on the setbacks as opposed to the new construction. Am I correct in saying that?
Through you, Mayor, both the new 2-unit dwelling as well as the existing home will be encroaching into the setback. The new 2-unit dwelling is asking for a rear setback variance of 5 meters instead of 9.1 for the rear setback and 3 meters for the interior side yard setback.
Okay, thank you. I was just misreading that diagram then. Thank you.
Councillor Herbert?
Thank you. In the same image that has that triangle, it highlights sort of the first spot I see parking, and parking for the new unit appears to be what we're discussing here. But where's what's the plan with the existing unit? And I'm just trying to understand the parking layout of the site overall.
So there will be 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit in the duplex, which will be in the garage, so the first floor of the duplex. And then the 2 parking spaces outside will be for the existing single unit dwelling.
So as I look at that site now, there's a carport or something on the north side of the property, and that's to go away, or what happens with that? It looks like they're currently using it as maybe a little bit of a parking spot to the north as well. So that's sort of what I was expecting your answer to be.
So currently you're only allowed 1 access to the property, so that carport will be removed and parking access to the property will be with at the new parking lot.
Thank you. In the development we just saw, there was some room inside the garage that was in addition to parking a vehicle, so for bike space. Are we using the same regulation for this, or is it just a single, or is it just the cars and it's full? I'm just trying to figure out how to score the parking on this one.
To my knowledge, it's just for the vehicles.
Good. For now. Mr. Prahalad, on the rooftop decks, there's do the railings go right to the edge of the building? And I'm just thinking of the overlook to the neighbors. Are they pushed back a little bit?
Based on the drawings that I received, the railings will be going to the edges of the building.
Okay. And there's just a single family home in the adjacent lot. Is that right?
Sorry, so I'm assuming you mean the current single family dwelling on the lot right now?
Yeah. Who are their neighbors? Is there a single family lot to the south?
Through you, Mayor, there is a single family lot to the south, and there is a multifamily dwelling unit to the north, which has about, I think, 7 or 8 townhomes.
Council, any other questions? Council Pengill?
Yeah, 38427, which is, I think, the lot directly to the south. Just trying to look at the setbacks there. It looks like it's less than the required 5 meters as well, but on the diagram, it seems to suggest it is meeting the 5 meters. Do we know, is this new proposal getting a smaller setback than the neighbor currently has, or would they both sort of at the end of the day be about a 3 meter setback? Or do we know what the setback is on 38427? Through you, Mayor, without looking at the GIS map, I cannot tell you what the setback is for the neighboring property.
I can answer that question.
Go ahead.
The neighboring property is about, I would say 1.5 meters to the corner of the house, maybe less.
All right, I don't see any other hands, so I'll just read out my little thing here. The proponent and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard electronically or over the phone, or by computer or in person at Municipal Hall with respect to the proposed variances to District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200/2011. The two proposed variances outlined in the staff report are the rear yard setback from 9.15 meters to 5 meters and the side yard setback from 4.57 meters to 3 meters. Please note there is limited in-person participation available from council chambers at Municipal Hall. If you wish to participate this evening and you're connecting electronically on telephone, just dial *3 to be placed on the speakers list. On WebEx, go to the participant panel and click on the hand icon. When it's your turn to speak, you'll receive a voice prompt via telephone or a dialog box if you're on WebEx. Please commence your remarks by clearly stating your name or address and your neighborhood. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. For anyone participating at Municipal Hall, you can just raise your hand and I'll alternate between speakers if there's people online who also wish to speak. So I'll go to our first Municipal Hall. Is there anyone in council chambers that wishes to speak to the variance? Go ahead. Just state your name and neighborhood or address, please.
Hi, test. Hi. Okay. I'm Nick Field. I'm the owner of this property. So I actually live in the little yellow house that's there right now. I can definitely understand this is a strange thing to be looking at, but I've been looking at how I can better this property and the neighborhood, considering it's stuck within 3 schools. It's got, I think, 4 schools within a 5-minute walk. And I've got 2 little young daughters, so I plan on sending them to to Les Aiglons right across, and then the high school. So I want to make the neighborhood better. The existing little yellow house needs an upgrade. It currently has the driveway on the north side of it, which doesn't make sense at all. So that north driveway and the carport will be deleted, and everything will be amalgamated into the driveway on the south side. And where the duplex will be. And I know it's because it's shaped like, the lot is shaped like a scalene triangle. We're doing our best so that we can fit that duplex in, and that's the only thing that is permitted in that zoning as well. So I think we've done a good job at making that work. And in a perfect world, this lot would be amalgamated with all of the lots around it, but unfortunately that's not realistic. Behind this, on the east side, you're going to have, there's a development proposal for, I think, 4 other duplexes, so 8 units, and then 3 townhomes, I believe. If that goes ahead, the setbacks, if it were one lot, they would all be crunched together. But they're not. So there'll be good spacing between all those buildings. On the north side, you've got Arbutus Grove, and there's plenty of space over there. And then on the south side, you've got the formerly green, now black duplex that's there, which is crunched up to the lot line. But they're closer to the lot line than this proposed setback. And if it was the same lot, they would be even closer together. And in a perfect world, they would be the same lot, but it's not a perfect world. So if you have any specific questions about it, because I know it is confusing, it's kind of outside the box, so I'm happy to answer any that are relevant, particularly towards the setbacks or anything like that. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Just appreciate you saying scalene triangle. There is someone participating online, so I will go to Ms. Arthurs.
Tyler Ovington, you are next. Please unmute yourself and you're up.
Perfect. Can everybody hear me there?
We can, Mr. Ovington, just start with your name and your place of residence or your neighborhood, and you've got 5 minutes to speak to the variances, please.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mayor and Council. My name is Tyler Ovington. I live at 38459 Buckley Avenue, which is 2 properties to the north of the proponent's lot. I think that, you know, the variance requests are quite reasonable, and that the proposal is pretty creative given the very unique shape of the property. And as the proponent mentioned, you know, it's not possible to amalgamate it with any of the neighboring properties at this time. So I feel like the small variance requests are a good idea, you know, to approve them, to be able to give a couple more nice units and rental units at that. I do live here with my family as well, 2 girls and my new son, and we love being across from the school, you know, walking distance to downtown. It's really an ideal location. So the fact that he's building under the existing zoning and yeah, just providing that opportunity for at least a couple more potentially families or, you know, individuals perhaps, but I think the opportunity that it creates and how it's in line with the Wilson microplan, I feel like I think it's a pretty good variance to approve. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mr. Ovington. Anyone else participating online, Ms. Arthurs? Okay. Council, I'll come back to you for any last questions. All right, the staff recommendation before us is to approve the variances along with a few registrations, securing the energy source and the rental tenure. Let's move by Council Race, seconded by Council Pettengill. Comments, Council Race?
Thank you. And I will be supporting this. I think, you know, in this variance procedure and process, one of the things I've seen over the past decisions like this, it's very often dictated by these strangely formed scaling triangles, in this case, lots, which by themselves, just as a sort of a remnant almost of a subdivision, but by themselves present very challenging building envelopes. This is one example, and it is creative. I certainly support the project in that sense. It is, I think, consistent with goals of our council, first of all, around the neighborhood plan, but also to sort of gently densify some of these areas and provide for more infill housing. And so that, for me, justifies any encroachment on the setbacks, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you. I'll certainly support this project. I think it's a unique way to increase housing with gentle density here, and it's a creative solution. Ideally, the railings on the rooftop decks wouldn't go right to the edge, so that we can protect a little bit of privacy for the neighbor to the south. But the fact that this is rental housing in this neighborhood and it's aligned with the plan, it's a challenging lot. So these variances seem reasonable, given that none of the existing single family homes actually meet the established setbacks for these lots. So I appreciate the creativity and the addition of this duplex to the neighborhood. Councilor Herford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this variance, and I do think when we sort of overlay our modern regulations onto some of these older neighborhoods, even with a normal square rectangular shaped lot, it's challenging. So given the shape of the lot and the goals achieved here with the rentals, I'll be supporting it. I do think that some more consideration can be given to the parking, we're not being asked to vary the parking. I think it meets sort of our existing regulations. But when all of the parking in my lived experience, when all the parking is inside a garage, a portion of that garage is going to get taken up by toys. And I'm not sure how to untangle those things, because we don't want to necessarily have a 2-car garage for toys and then some extra and require more space for parking. But I do think that that some more consideration to the functionality of that would be beneficial to the project overall. But that doesn't have anything to do with the variance we're considering. So I'll be supporting.
Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. This development will help further address the need for more purpose-built rental housing in Squamish. I support this variance for a neighborhood that is densifying. Just one more project, one more step towards infilling this neighborhood. I think that, as others have mentioned, this is a creative addition to the neighborhood with the variances that I think will work. I support the motion.
Any other comments? Seeing none, call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you, Mr. Pollitt, for your presentation. I think it feels right to take a break until 7:35. So we'll recess till 7:35. Welcome back to our regular council meeting. We are now on item 8, bylaws. And first up is District of Squamish Remuneration and Expenses Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw number 2858, 2021. And I am turning things over to Ms. Pollock.
Thank you. My name is Charlene Pollock. I'm the Manager of Legislative Services, and I'm here tonight to speak to the amendment to the Remuneration and Expenses Bylaw. So the purpose of this amendment is that a section has been added to the bylaw to address absence of a member of council due to maternity leave or parental leave and continued payment and benefits during the leave. And this addition to the remuneration bylaw is in line with the council maternity and parental leave policy. So a little bit of background and information. The maternity and parental leave policy was approved by council in June 2019. If a member of council provides notice of maternity and/or parental leave pursuant to the policy and the bylaw, the absence is considered to be at the leave of council, and a council motion approving the leave is not required. So next steps and staff recommendation, the bylaw is given first 3 readings tonight. It will be brought forward to the next council meeting for adoption. And the staff recommendation is that District of Squamish Remuneration and Expenses Bylaw number 1503, 1997, Amendment Bylaw 2858, 2021 be given first 3 readings. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock. Council, any questions? Councillor Herford.
Thank you. When we approved the paternal leave policy, this wasn't done at that time. Was this just sort of like the rubber hitting the road and us realizing that needs to be done, or has there been some sort of change in between? Because I had assumed that this was sort of part of what we were. This definitely encompasses what I was thinking at the time I supported that motion. So,
through the mayor, yeah, it's something that was missed at the time and realized in the summer that we needed to add this to the bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Pollock, oftentimes counselors have other jobs, and so do they still have the option of refusing their pay during maternity leave so it doesn't affect their EI benefits through their other role? So it doesn't require them to accept payment. Can they waive it?
It's my understanding that it would be up to the council member whether they, their preference would be to receive other benefits versus continuing pay.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? All right. The staff recommendation is to give amendment bylaw number 2858 first three readings. Does someone like to move that? Moved by Council Hertford, second by Council French. Any further comments? Just like to thank Councillor Stoner for helping us see where we needed to dot the i's and cross the t's. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have District of Squamish fees and charges bylaw, amendment bylaw for Usian Pavilion number 2868, 2021. And there are a number of people joining us, Ms. Woodside, Ms. Digger, and Ms. Gill. I don't know who I'm turning it over to, so I'll just let one of you just pipe up and speak. Thanks.
I'm going to be starting off the presentation. I'm just waiting to have the share content enabled. Perfect. Can someone please indicate if you can see my screen okay?
It's all good. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Alicia Woodside, and I'm Economic Development Specialist here at the District. Today, I'm joined by Nav Gill, Portfolio Administrator, and Sarah Dicker, Arts and Culture Acting Manager. And together, we're presenting a review of the temporary park use program since our last update in October 2020. This is really a joint project, and it's been a collaboration between all of our departments. So the objective of today's presentation is twofold. The first is to provide an update of the program and discuss a possible extension of the temporary program. The second piece is to discuss returning to council with considerations for long-term program options beyond the temporary program. And that's when I'll hand it over to Sarah and Nav. Let's first dive into the temporary program update. As a quick refresher, the Temporary Park Use Program launched in June of 2020 with the intent of supporting local businesses through COVID-19 recovery. The program was designed to support business recovery, physical distancing, and community connectedness. As part of this program, staff created a new temporary option offering businesses the opportunity to apply to use municipal park space for a quick and easy option to bring their operations outside during the time when there were a lot of restrictions on their indoor operations. To ease constraints further, fees associated with booking the pavilion were also temporarily waived. Originally, the program was set to expire on October 31st of 2020, but it was extended again by council and just recently expired this past Sunday. The program has seen healthy demand since its launch, especially over summer and fall periods. Since our last report to council 1 year ago, local small businesses and nonprofits have used the initiative to deliver 28 different programs throughout Squamish. The most popular use was for recreational activities, which made up approximately half of all uses in the past year. Examples included outdoor yoga, dance, martial arts, fitness, skateboarding, and many of these programs were offering inclusive services for all ages, including infants, parents, youth, seniors, and a wide variety of programs. There were also a variety of other programs such as pop-up retail shops, as well as faith-based, cause-based, and mental health services, as well as education programs. Just like last year, it was interesting to see that half of the uptake was from not-for-profit organizations. And as I mentioned, staff receive very few applications in the winter or spring. The vast majority of use occurs over summer and fall months due to our weather here. Staff recommend extending the temporary park use program until June 1st, 2022. This will allow businesses additional time to make use of the program while still some COVID-19 pandemic restrictions remain. In addition, this timeline is aligned with the recent extension of the temporary patio and sidewalk sale program, which was extended to the same date. I'm now going to hand it off to Sarah Dicker.
Thanks, Alicia. So now we'll be moving into part 2 of the presentation, and we're going to look ahead at the long term and discuss what could occur in the future beyond this temporary program. Next slide, please. So prior to the temporary park use program, a streamlined process did not exist for businesses or nonprofits to book municipal park space for the smaller grassroots type of community use. Normally the only district park with a fee structure in place would be the pavilion, which comes with the use of Junction Park. Fees are charged to commercial events and business related bookings for the use of the park, and there are no fees in place for local not-for-profits use of the Junction Park and the pavilion. For commercial use of the parks prior to the program, for commercial use of other parks other than Junction Park, there were no formal fee structure or process in place. Municipal parks were used informally for the most part, unless exclusive use was required for infrastructure being installed. Some bookings were captured through recreation services, but the process was not clearly established and difficult for the public and staff to navigate. And those are for the parks that were not within the fees and charges bylaw. If a community group or business requires the use of the district park for an event, the Arts and Culture Department works with the organizer to meet the special event permit conditions. This does not impact park use fees, and special events do not fall within the temporary park use program. And I'll hand it over to Nav.
Thanks, Sarah. So we thought it would be helpful to kind of clarify the differences between the temporary patio program and the temporary park use program. So the patio program entails use of sidewalks, roads, as well as private land, whereas the park use program is just municipal parks. And the patio program is kind of like bricks and mortar businesses spreading onto adjacent sidewalks, roads, and private land. Whereas in parks, these businesses and nonprofits are kind of doing their own standalone operations. The patio program existed prior to the temporary program, but the temporary program did kind of create an expedited temporary version. Whereas the park use program, we didn't have anything in place. There wasn't a formal process or program in place. So this is sort of a new territory for us. Alicia, next slide, please. So looking forward, since we received excellent feedback from participating businesses and nonprofits, and there's great activation in the parks, staff recommend that we continue this program beyond the temporary program. So what we're looking to do is before April 1st, 2022, we would return to council with long-term program options, and we would look at incorporating learnings from the temporary park use program, align with and complement existing programs and policies that exist in recreation, arts and culture, and real estate services. We also want to see how this booking program can fit and align with events, recreation, as well as other district operations and parks. We would also engage with users of the program and the general public, as well as establish a fee structure. And we would also like to figure out how we should do bookings for the new covered structures that have been put in place. Next slide, Alicia. As such, we have 3 resolutions on the table. So one to extend the temporary park use program to June 1st. And then we have an amendment to the fees and charges bylaw, as well as that staff will return to council prior to April 1st to present options for the long-term program. And with that, we'll turn it over to Mayor and Council for any questions or feedback.
Thank you for your presentation. To the 3 of you, Council, do you have any questions on this? I'm not seeing any hands. It's a good sign. Would someone like to move the staff recommendation? Moved by Councillor Herford, second by Councillor Race. Any comments? Councillor Pangam.
Happy to see this and happy to see it was successful. Just one thing I wanted to raise, and I realize there's a whole lot of complication with this, but as I was looking at this and thinking about some of the neighborhood plans where urban agriculture has come up, I saw at the SLRD a presentation on food recovery programs, and have had someone reach out to me just about challenges about, they've got some local produce, like very micro scale, that they're having trouble figuring out how they can get it to a small local market. And in the back of my mind is, wouldn't it be cool as part of this if truly local, just for a weekend, someone's kids could go out and sell the potatoes they grew or something at the park, kind of like the market sort of idea. And I recognize there's issues with insurance and all these sorts of things. But for me, if there's some way we could sort that out, it would really help, I think, with a lot of our agriculture and community garden type things we're doing. And so that would be wonderful.
May I respond to that through the chair?
Fortunately not.
Okay.
But you can after we debate the motion. I'll come back to you, Ms. Woodside. Any other comments? All right. Certainly supporting this. Look forward to the longer term plans that will come back for April 1. I think it was really one of the silver linings of the pandemic was showing us how we could think about and use our park space differently. So it was really encouraging to see how many people took up the offer, and look forward to seeing what staff come back with. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Woodside.
Thank you. Through you, the chair. Just to respond to Councillor Pettingill, I think I probably understand who that individual was that you spoke to, because I had meetings with that individual as well. And we really did do our best to support that individual through this program. Unfortunately, the food legalities are outside of our jurisdiction. So ultimately, it was a decision by Vancouver Coastal Health as to where they can operate. And so that's kind of where this program, we weren't able to support just because of that legislation, unfortunately. But yeah, I just wanted to add that in. I can also really appreciate that. Ideally, we can support small businesses from all sectors through this program.
Thanks for that clarification. All right. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
We are now on to item 9, the Community Planning and Infrastructure Can Export 2022 funding. Ms.
Thank you.
Woodside.
I am back. I will share a second screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Mayor and Council again. My name is Alicia. I'm Economic Development Specialist here at the District. And tonight I'm also presenting on the opportunity of applying to the federal Can Export Community Investment Funding Program. Can Export is a federal funding program, as I mentioned, from Global Affairs Canada, with the objective of increasing Canadian employment by supporting communities' collaborative efforts to attract, retain, and expand foreign direct investment, or FDI. Economic Development, our department, has been successful with this funding program for the past 3 years. In past years, funding was applied to develop the Emerging Sector Roadmap and Action Plan, as well as investing in data collection and analysis, team training and capacity building, website development to support target sector growth, and a number of other things. While this funding is focused on attracting foreign investment from outside of Canada, we're leveraging this opportunity to help support existing businesses with new tools, education, and training, and to attract new businesses to the region to increase local employment opportunities. FDI can attract new innovation, entrepreneurship, and capital to benefit the existing local business ecosystem. As an example, FDI may include entrepreneurs seeking to establish a new target sector company in Squamish, individuals and companies seeking a partnership opportunity, acquisition, or equity investment opportunity in an existing Squamish firm, or a new company that will serve to fill an important supply chain gap with one of our existing sectors. Staff are seeking investment opportunities that can support existing core sectors with new supply chain partners, infrastructure and support services, and capital investments. And just to recap, this funding can be up to $500,000 in funding, and the projects must be kind of 1 year in duration, so next year. The funding reimburses up to 50% of eligible expenses. So the department intends to use CanExport funding to continue implementing the Emerging Sector Roadmap and Action Plan. That was endorsed by Council in June of 2020. The goal of this work is to facilitate a local business ecosystem that supports high-value local employment reflective of the local workforce, where the composition of the local economy is diverse and adaptable to changing conditions, and where local firms are supported by innovation, research and development capacity, supportive infrastructure, and a positive business climate. As an outcome, Squamish will be a business destination known for its creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. While CanExport funding is aimed at attracting foreign investment, as I mentioned, staff plan to use this funding on initiatives that can provide a broad benefit to the existing core, emerging, and enabling sectors. For example, staff will approach investment attraction with a goal of helping recruit supply chain enabling companies. In 2021, the economic development team has been actively implementing priority areas 1 and 2 of the Emerging Sector Roadmap, and we've been engaging in local cluster development, as well as foundational business and investment attraction strategies to support the attraction of target sectors. Progress in 2021 has included hosting an Emerging Sector series to engage local businesses and organizations, developing a new strategic sector website, images, and video assets, which are set to be completed early in 2022, as well as the development of a lead generation playbook and tour program that will be used to support strategic investment from target sectors. Finally, economic development has invested time into building strategic relationships with partners at the provincial and federal level. If the application is successful, key activities in 2022 would include the development of an on-demand target sector attraction training program for district staff, council, if members of council would like to attend, and partners, as well as the development of a digital-friendly familiarization tour program for investors from target sectors. Our proposed work plan totals $40,000 with 50% requested from CanExport and 50% requested in Economic Development's 2021 Special Projects Budget request. We are looking for council support to pursue the grant application. However, if the district's portion, 50% portion of the funding is not fully approved through the budget approval process, then we would decline the grant and scale activities accordingly. There could, of course, be a partial acceptance of our grant application, which would mean partial implementation of the Emerging Sector Roadmap and partial funding from the contribution. And an example of that is we may implement activities over a 2-year time frame instead of a 1-year time frame, as we're hoping to. So today's recommendation is that the District of Squamish authorize an application to the CanExport Community Investment Program to fund the implementation of the Emerging Sector Roadmap and Action Plan. And that concludes my presentation. I'd love to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Woodside. Council, any questions? Councilor Anderson?
Ms. Woodside, I'm going to quote from the report, and I just wanted a little, if you could clarify one of the comments I believe you made. In the report, staff are seeking investment opportunities that can support existing core sectors with new supply chain partners, infrastructure and support services, and capital investments. By that, I take it that you mean, and I'm focused on the targeting of emerging sector firms and the balanced attention between core and enabling sector and emerging sector firms. But are you saying in this sentence and what you may have just related that the emerging sector firms that we are targeting can help the core sectors by introducing new value chain partners? Is that, I'm understanding this right, and I hope that I've been clear myself. That is, the program is targeting explicitly emerging sectors. What is the benefit for core sectors? Are you suggesting that there is?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson, and through the chair. The kind of core and enabling and emerging sectors in Squamish are very much an ecosystem. That's how we view it. And the plan for the Can Export funding is to leverage it in a way that supports existing firms, because as everyone knows, our employment space resources and infrastructure is limited in Squamish. And so what we're currently undertaking right now as a team is we're doing a lot of analysis to understand what are the key supply chain gaps that exist for our core sectors, and which ones could we recruit that would really move the needle. In some cases, these might be classified as an emerging sector, as we named it in the report. In other cases, they might not have been included as an emerging sector, but they will strongly benefit an existing core sector. And so right now we're undertaking that work, as I mentioned, doing a lot of analysis, and we'll be doing interviews with experts from the sectors. So that will inform next year's work in kind of going out and trying to attract those companies through the training, and also through this familiarization tour that we're hoping to implement next year.
Thank you, Ms. Woodside. Maybe I'll just elaborate a little bit on what I'm curious about. It strikes me as I read the opportunity of this granting program, and I think of the core and enabling sector gaps or types of industries that could benefit from it or that it could relate to. Say the transportation sector, that's a core and enabling sector. So is primary and secondary wood products. In transportation, battery electric train technology, we have opportunity for that. We have people very interested at our railway park and West Coast Railway Association. Marine services, also transportation. Mass timber plant, we have a company that wants to provide timber to feedstock, and these are core and enabling sectors. So I'm just interested, and I guess you've alleviated my concern in that it seems that you are evaluating this ongoing, these opportunities that apply generally in our ecosystem. Because as I look through our strategic plan priority areas, green economy, greenhouse gas emissions, high quality local employment, increasing concentration of firms, cooperation with First Nations, these apply throughout the ecosystem and not only to emerging target sector firms. So I guess what the picture of concern that I'm painting is that we've given a balanced attention to both components as we've drawn up a map of our ecosystem, the core and enabling sectors receiving due attention. And it seems that can I interpret that this is undergoing ongoing evaluation on the department's part?
Through the chair again, definitely that's accurate. And this isn't like many other projects where, if something's done or there's a report at the end that includes it. This is ongoing work. A lot of the analysis will continue, and we're engaging in research and different forms of engagement with local businesses all the time on our team. And so it's not something that we ever stop. We're always looking at those needs and looking at, okay, how can we support? So it's definitely something that we're going to be continuing to evaluate.
Thank you, Ms. Woodside. Thank you, Chair.
Seeing no other hands, would someone like to move the motion that we authorize the application to CanExport Community Investment Program for the Emerging Sector Roadmap and Action Plan? Moved by Councillor Herford, second by Councillor French. Any further comments? Seeing none. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Woodside.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. All right, move along. We're on 9B, corporate services. First up is a discussion of the airport strategy. I believe I am turning this over to Mr. Plum.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Oh, my video turned off on me. One moment, please. You try and share the screen here. Why that's not letting me share? Oh, okay. I'm now the presenter. There we go. For some reason, my PowerPoint, bear with me, please. PowerPoint's not pulling up. Oh, there we go. Are we having some success? Can you see that in the PowerPoint?
You just need to put it in presentation mode, Mr. Plum.
I'm there right now.
Perfect.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Neil Plum, Manager of Real Estate. I believe Mr. Rolston is here from the Engineering Department as well. And so we just want to walk you through the report that was attached to the agenda this evening. And the purpose of the goal tonight is to have council endorse the recent geotech report that was completed specifically on the Squamish Airport on behalf of the District of Squamish. And Mr. Wilson's drafted up some proposed geotech planning guidelines to guide sort of future use of lands at the airport as a general concept. And then to discuss advancing to the next phase in development of an airport strategy. So I just want to walk back a little bit and just put some context on the table. As you may be aware, the Squamish Airport is owned by the District of Squamish. We have about a 2,400 square foot or 2,400-foot runway there that was constructed way back in 1969 by the Squamish Flying Club and recently was repaved in the not too distant future. And what we've learned over the years with this, with the airport is it's also a very important asset in the district's emergency response infrastructure. Some of you may remember that way back in 2001, there was a referendum on the airport and which limited the tenancies there to 10 tenants. And that referendum is still valid today on the books and has guided our work to date. And as you'll see right now, we only have currently 5 tenants at the airport. We have 3 fixed wing tenants, Glacier Air, Sea to Sky Air, and the Flying Club. And we have 2 helicopters at Blackcomb Aviation and Black Tusk Helicopter. So the airport is managed by district staff currently, and we do get some support from Technical Aviation Advisor. The airport has generally been in what I could call a holding pattern for about 20 years at least. The Chikai Fan terrain hazard policy back in the 1990s prohibited long-term leases at the airport or subdivisions or rezonings, any types of those development-oriented activities until what was deemed to be area-wide mitigation at the airport. So currently based on that, there really hasn't been any airport strategy developed for the airport to guide its operations, the management, and even just longer term planning for how the airport can be utilized to the benefit of the community. So more recently, the official community plan shown here is the OCP. It has language in it that endorses long-term airport planning for Squamish Airport. In the 5-year financial plan, which is affectionately referred to as the budget, that does endorse and also an airport strategy to be completed in 2 phases. phase one of that strategy was to complete a geotech analysis to determine whether there were areas of the airport that could be used safely based on new data sets that had been created on the Chikai fan hazard that updated the earlier information from the 90s and some information that had happened, I think, in the early 2000s. And that recently completed geotech analysis, as Mr. Wilson's going to explain shortly, does show there's some areas at the airport that could be used long-term safely, regardless of how the mitigation might play out in the future. So with that, that geotech analysis, where the next step in the project that was in the budget was to come forward with to council to obtain the opportunity to advance the strategy for the airport, which would be a real comprehensive look at the airport. There's numerous aspects to the airport, including how it's operated, safety, environmental impacts, what kind of infrastructure is required out there, how things are funded, and importantly also how the airport would be managed on an ongoing basis. And that's a holistic package that we're trying to look at here as we go forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Wolfson and have him walk you through a couple slides on the geotech analysis. And I think I'll keep the screen up, I guess. David's there.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm David Rolston, Manager of Municipal Infrastructure with the District of Squamish. So I'm here to discuss a recent Chikai fan debris flow hazard assessment that was undertaken to inform the airport strategy. The district engaged BGC Engineering, who have developed a debris flow model for the Chikai fan. BGC's mandate was to review the hazard exposure across the airport property to assist the district in assessing what areas of the airport could be developed safely. And so BGC evaluated 3 different hazard scenarios. The first was a baseline, which is today's scenario, where there's no mitigation in place. The second was with a mid-fan berm, which is considered as a backup plan if the barrier proves to be unfeasible. And it is exactly how it's titled. It's a berm that runs from the Alice Lake access road across the mid-fan to just south of the airport. The third was with the barrier. So this is the large barrier on the Chikai River just south of Cat Lake near the apex of the fan. This is currently being designed by Squamish Sea to Sky Developments to support their Chikai River development proposal. So by considering these 3 scenarios, staff feel confident that the range of results encompasses an appropriate range of potential future hazard conditions that could affect the airport. Next slide, please, Neil. So the assessment identified 3 zones that are shown on this map that represent areas with distinct hazard characteristics, and I'll speak to these on the next slide. So the policy document interpreted the BGC hazard report and translated that to provide guidance on how the airport lands may be used safely, as well as provided planning considerations in the development of the airport strategy. So just to walk through the recommendations within each hazard zone. So hazard area A, shown in yellow at the southeast of the property, is the highest hazard area. It's not likely suitable for significant human occupation, but it is likely suitable for low intensity uses such as storage or airport hangars. Hazard area B, shown in light green towards the south end of the airport lands, is likely possible to have some development there, including occupation, and that could be included in the airport strategy if it's desired. However, the hazards are lower further to the north within hazard area C, which is shown in dark green. This is the lowest hazard area. This is the best location to plan for any future airport development. And if it's considered desirable, it's likely that buildings with significant occupation could be built safely. And just as a final note, it's recommended that any development proposals at the airport be subject to a risk assessment that confirms that the risk to loss of life is within the district's risk tolerance criteria. So with that, I'll hand it back to Neil.
Thank you, David. So with the information from the geotech analysis showing the possibilities for portions of the airport to be used safely, it creates the door for the district to consider the development of a longer term airport strategy. So the slide on the screen that you're looking at right now, it shows sort of 4 key steps being proposed to how to move the strategy forward. So column 1, which is sort of shaded in green, is first thing we were proposing to do is actually do an assessment of the current conditions across all aspects of the airport, including operations, regulatory and governance, infrastructure, and financial. And I'm not going to read through every item on those lists there, but you can see it covers a whole range of aspects of things that are happening at the airport and things we need to consider when we're assessing where we are at this point in time. And one of the reasons why you'll see it's shaded in green, it's one area that we expect as real estate services, we will provide a fair bit of support on because we have a lot of that information already in our files, but we are looking for the opportunity to actually just pull all this together into one common space and create what we call sort of a common truth part to the document. And so we can pull all these things together, put it in one document, set all stakeholders involved regarding the airport, whether it's council or the community or neighbors of the airport or operators there, can look at and understand and evaluate all the aspects of the airport from one sort of central document. We found in some of the development and other strategies that we've worked on that this is a really important first step because it kind of sets the foundation of knowledge moving forward. And otherwise, without that, there can be different perspectives or perceptions and gaps on knowledge on where we're at with something like this, especially something that has multiple jurisdictions involved as well. So a really, really critical first step. So then column 2 identifies to the second, to the right, to the left, is the area where we're looking for an aviation expert to analyze and make recommendations as to things, changes, considerations that we need to consider to effectively operate this airport to the benefit of the community as we move forward into the longer term. That this is where we look to have that aviation experience come to the table, looking at best practices and how we operate this airport on a variety of fronts. And things like, also infrastructure analysis, that's something that engineering can support in looking at the geotechnical analysis, how things might get laid out at the airport, all important things to look at, and also financial and ultimately looking at economic development opportunities. So what we're thinking or what we're hoping is that we would get a report back from a consultant that's going to sort of provide 2 sets of recommendations. The first set being that what we'd like to do is focus initially on how to advance decision-making on the existing tenants. So we have the 5 tenants that are at the airport right now. Some of these tenants have been there operating for decades and have never really had a long-term lease. They're all operating on short-term leases at this point in time, which and they've been seeking to extend their leases so they can actually solidify their operations. And several of these operations provide backbone for our emergency response infrastructure. So it's something that we should take a look at. And then column 4 is where we were hoping to get some recommendations from a consultant on what we might want to look at beyond the existing tenants. And I put a list in there of items to consider. Our expectation is we don't have a sort of a set agenda here as to how this may play out. We're looking for the consultant to give us recommendations based on the analysis that comes out of columns 1 and 2. So, that's going to be something that will be dictated by the findings on those first 2 levels of analysis. I'd also like to mention at this point that this proposed scope is not cast in stone. We prepared this for council's consideration. We've looked at other airport strategies and master plans created in a handful or more of airports around the province in the last 5 to 10 years. And we've sort of compared what we've seen in those master plans and strategies to what we're dealing with here on the ground in Squamish. And so we've put this forward, and especially this sort of split between where we are with existing tenants and where we would be with anything beyond that being sort of split into 2 segments. But it is possible once we engage with a consultant that they may have expertise and knowledge that suggests a different scope or different approach. And so we're open to that, obviously. And if that is something that we find as we go forward, we would definitely come back to council and provide council a heads up as to where that may be heading in to get their endorsement of that. And I think the other thing I'd just like to close on this slide is that, the strategic approach resonates with staff here because a lot of these elements that are in the columns 1 and 2, they can be addressed as sort of one-offs on their own, but they tend to be interconnected. And ideally, if they're kind of, advanced in a larger package, it helps moving things forward. And then just an example of that would be that, for us, our ability to operate this airport effectively is really a function of the level of management that we can bring to the airport. And, that level of management is also going to be a function of the finances that are available to bring in the management expertise and support, which is a function of, the finances, which is also a function of the level of tendencies that could be there as well. So it's all kind of tied in. So that's why we wanted to present this way and for council consideration. So you'll see in the report, there's I will use the words, a highly aggressive timeline is proposed. Having worked in other strategies that have taken much longer, I can appreciate this is a very, very aggressive time frame. And the reason for that is that, this is going to be heavily supported by real estate services and other departments. Everybody has a lot of project work on our plates as well. And we have other projects as well on our work plan that we need to complete as we move into 2022. So we'd like to try and get in and hit this strategy as hard as we can and throw a lot of resources over the next few months and see if we can get this thing to a place where we have a final report with some recommendations. It doesn't mean that the work ends in mid-February, but we'd like to get some recommendations by then, if possible, so that we can then go off and work with those recommendations at a staff level over the course of 2022. So with that, there's a resolution in the report that's now up on the screen. I won't read it word for word, but these are the resolutions that are in front of council tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mayor and Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plum. Thank you, Mr. Ralston. Council, any clarifying questions on the engineering report or the staff report at this time? Councillor French, then Councillor Anderson. Mr. Plum, if you could stop sharing your screen, that would be helpful.
Will do.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
So when I was reporting on airport issues in the news media through the 90s, there were some very tense conversations, and I'm happy that we're having this discussion. I want to acknowledge the very patient business owners that have been operating at the airport on short-term leases and have been for many years. Those businesses have been calling for longer certainty and so longer leases than what they currently have. And I believe this discussion is all part of trying to work out some kind of scenario that could potentially lead to longer leases for those very patient businesses. And in the staff report, you mentioned, Mr. Plum, knowledge gaps, and I'm particularly interested in what we do or do not know about air movement data, and specifically, are we currently collecting information on how many landings and takeoffs are happening either southerly or northerly?
So yes, we are in the process of collecting that. We have collected some recent data on that, which we'd like to present to council. We just haven't had an opportunity to do that, and we can bring that forward at a later date.
Okay, great. I had follow-up questions if your answer was different, but that takes care of it. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson?
Mr. Plum, I have a couple of questions. Firstly, we do, as council, receive a good deal of correspondence now and then from regarding the airport, noise issues in particular, but some of the correspondence raise concerns or reflect or make statements that suggest that we need to be clear as a community what the role of our airport is currently, and including currently. And I wonder, is it your sense that we have, no, I have visited the airport webpage that the district has, but not in particular looking for this, but it strikes me in reading some of the comments that council receives and listening to people in the community that we need a good statement for the purposes of the public engagement process that we'll be engaging in the next couple of months. Do we have this at the present time? Do we have a clear statement as to the purposes and role of our airport for emergency services, infrastructure for industries, tourism, and so forth? Do we have this at this present time?
Through the mayor, no, we don't, and that's one of the things that we are looking to achieve through this strategy development is the opportunity to dedicate the time and energy to pull all this together at this point in time. So no, we don't have that clear. I mean, we have a lot of insights we've gleaned from Transport Canada over the years in responding to noise complaints. It's something that we continue to work through. It's not an area like aviation is a federal jurisdiction, so it complicates our responses in certain situations. So it's something that we're working through. So I definitely feel that it is an area that we can improve upon, and so that's something that we are hoping that by pulling the strategy together, it's something that we can bring together so everybody in the community can understand what our role is and where we are today, and the community can engage on where it sees it goes in the future as well.
Thank you. My second question is regarding the terms of reference for the proposed consultant study. Now, both Airport Future Zone East and Airport Future Zone, or I'm sorry, the Airport Future Zone West includes hazard category areas B and C. That's a large area. There's probably 20 acres there. I don't know, just roughly. But there are and have been landfill activities there. And my question or concern is not so much lease arrangements now or in the near future, but the ground conditions and the potential constraints there may be for future use for airport related or other related. My question then is, will it be within the terms of reference for the consultant study to look at those ground conditions? Let's take, for example, the southerly area that is the joint Interfor District of Squamish waste management permit area. Can the consultant study examine the conditions and the constraints and the future uses of that parcel of land that's been used as a landfill?
Through the chair, yeah, our intention is to look at all the lands that have been deeded to the airport through the sponsored Crown grant that occurred back, I guess, in the late 60s or early 70s, and look at all of this as to how it fits into the bigger picture in the future. The budget is not substantial enough that we would actually have geotech samples of soil conditions in terms of stability and all that for all of these lands, but they certainly can look at how these lands can fit into the bigger picture in the longer term. We know that there has been wood waste in the ground on these sites, and so there will be some geotechnical constraints, for lack of a better word. But if in the long term, at some point, those sites are can be used for maybe parking aircraft or something, that's something that we can explore. But I would imagine that I'm not a geotechnical expert, and Mr. Rolston might be able to help, but we would have to look a lot deeper into the geotechnical stability of these soils to see what's capable there. But parking probably not a challenge, but beyond that would be a challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Plum.
Mr. Plum, do you think that we are implementing or following best practices when it comes to airport operations, environment, safety, noise mitigation?
Through you, Mayor, I would say there's a tremendous amount of room for improvement. And this is why, again, I feel a strategy is a useful place for us to move that forward. We have, as airport operators and managers from the staff level, we don't have aviation expertise. We do have access to it at time when we bring it in when we need it, but we feel that it would be very advantageous to have access to a consultant to come in and look at this airport on a holistic level and look at all aspects of it and all the aspects you're mentioning, whether it's noise or air quality. All these types of things are important considerations for this airport as we go forward. So our goal and our intent is to take it from where it's been, which is managed by district staff and to the best of our abilities with all of the the workload that we have, and recognizing that we're not necessarily paid to and our work job descriptions isn't to be there Saturdays and Sundays. There's a tremendous opportunity to move things forward. It's just, how do you move that forward? And part of that is also looking at things like how much funding is available, how much what kind of tendencies are there to support that funding. And so we feel like there's an opportunity to do a very holistic look here to move it forward on all fronts and to take this airport and from a fairly in its state where it's been for quite some time, and to put it into the policies in place and that need to be there, that is very clear to everybody in the community where our jurisdictions start and stop and how we can respond. And so the community can know very clearly what they can expect from us, and ideally that what they can expect is a well-run airport.
You mentioned the timeline is quite compressed. You also have a component of community engagement in here, but it falls over the winter holiday season, also during a time when we're doing budget and 2 major neighborhood planning processes. So why, given my colleagues' comments about how much our community liked to participate in airport discussions previously, how, like my gut instinct is that maybe we are not phasing this or timing this appropriately. What makes you confident that we can complete that engagement within the time frame that you've indicated?
So I can fully appreciate your comments regarding timing, and you do see a bigger picture than I do in terms of other things that are going on. This is the reason why we brought it forward right now, is because we have been, the tenants that have been there, and even just bringing this management approach forward, and the idea of creating a different management structure and approach to operating the airport. We were fairly constrained in really bringing that forward in a meaningful way until we really had a sense of geotechnically where we were going. If we had a geotech report that came out and said, this airport, no matter what happens, is in a highly hazardous area, which is what, to some degree, the original study said. If that was the continued analysis, then I think we'd be having a different conversation. And so with that analysis in hand now, which came out and was available in, I guess, in early October, we just felt that this is something that, as a staff, without seeing this bigger picture that council sees, that's something that we've been waiting for, trying to get to move this airport forward for probably over 10 years. And so we now have that data set, and we just felt it was important to bring it to council and to present it to council and let them know that this data set exists and that it does open the door to developing a strategy. And so, and I hear you loud and clear. And so I think I'm open to hearing more feedback from council as to if there are any tweaks or things they would like to see us to consider in this process as we move forward here.
Councilor Race and Councilor Herford.
Thank you. As I think about this, I think one of the most important early questions will be the appetite of the community for any expansion. And I think back to the debate of the late 90s that I think Councillor French referred to in the early 2000 referendum. And I came away from that with a sense that, the community could tolerate a certain size of airport, but they didn't want something with scheduled flights and a lot of traffic. And there was an environmental issue with, I know, with the safety of eagles and other wildlife. And so I think gauging the community's appetite for expansion is going to be probably in my mind, the most important thing, and other pieces would fall into place after that, depending on where we came from with that. But the other thing we've been talking about over the years is the quote unquote airport lands for a variety of different possible uses, like medium industrial, for example. And so I'm wondering, it may be that there's a limit on how many flights. Those are the things that seem to cause all the noise and concern in the community. But there may be a lot of other uses that might be able to exist on that land. And so I guess my question is, would this engagement or would this process look at that possibility? If we didn't want to increase airport activity, could we consider other uses for that land that might stimulate economic activity and added tax base and so forth, but not necessarily cause the impact that an airport might have on a neighborhood?
Through Chair, yes. I mean, I think there's a lot of airports, and we've talked to other airports as well about how they manage things like noise and things, and it seems to be a challenge for a lot of communities, and each community has different conditions in their community that dictate different things, but it seems to be a real challenge. So we see this moving forward as a scenario that we want to see everything all considered. I mean, it could vary. And sorry, what I've heard through discussions I've had with other places that, trying to attract, if you're going to attract other businesses into your airport area, especially if they're aviation related, you hear things like, more rotary oriented type operations or maintenance operations, which have less air movements is desirable. And so this is something that we are hoping that an aviation expert can come and look at our airport, understand the challenges that are here and recognize the community around it and help us navigate forward with looking at ideas and opportunities that could exist that fit in with, where the community's needs and desires might be. We do have, the land did come to us through what's called a sponsored Crown grant from the Crown and it is, the purposes going forward are meant to be used for aviation. So it's something we'd have to navigate with the Crown as we look forward. So we don't have a green light to go and drop industrial uses there. The landfilling operations that have existed there in the past were issues or items that were discussed with the Crown, 20 years ago, going forward, and were approved at that point. But as we go forward, we have always to be mindful of where we are with the sponsored Crown grant. But no, I mean, we're not, it's kind of sounds a little, corny, but, I'm not so much looking at what the outcome is here. I'm looking at what the process is going to be as to how we generate the information that we can bring forward to council and that council can look at and make meaningful decisions as to how they want to see this airport go in the future.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I like the sort of plan as outlined as far as what the projected outcomes are, but the timeline is concerning to me. And I was curious if I don't know, we've entered, to me, this almost feels, I mean, not quite as involved as some of our sub-area plans, but we've given multiple calendar years to, it feels like, and this project we're looking at compressing into a few months. So in lengthening that consultation, making that as with the community as robust as possible, I'm just curious how, like, what would extending that that look like? I'm looking at the budget ask, which comes from airport reserve, and the work proposed in the timeline proposed seems to be covered organizationally as well. But I'm concerned with how condensed it is. So I'd like to hear. So conceptually, I'm roughly there, but I'm having a hard time with the timing. So is this something that needs to be? So I guess is the finish line that date important for some reason? I imagine there's a spike of airport activity in the spring. Is that what we're looking for, or does adding a few months to this timeline double the budget or something like that. I'm just trying to wrap my head around those pieces.
Sure, through the chair. I mean, we haven't spoken directly to any consultants at this point in time. We wanted to have some direction from council before we did. I mean, it is possible that this time frame may be even too aggressive for any of the consultants that are out there that might be available to help us with this. And so that's something that we would definitely explore as we go forward, and we may need to come back to council in the not too distant future. I think what we wanted to signal here, and again, I appreciate it's aggressive, and I appreciate sort of the dynamic it's created in this discussion. I think we just wanted to signal to everybody that our intention is to try and get this work done as fast as we can. We do have, tenants that have been looking to extend leases for a long time. We do have, we deal with noise complaints, and we like to try and get potentially get moving towards an improved management approach by the summer, like you mentioned, Councillor Herford. So there's a variety of reasons, and we also have a lot of things on the plate as well as we head into next year's budget. There's projects that we're working on here as well that need to get done as well. So it's a combination of a bunch of factors.
Councillor Peckingham.
So one thing that in particular that's driving this is understanding the hazards and hazard mitigations, which is coming out of largely, I believe, the Chikai development, which means a whole bunch of new residential development in the area, which doesn't exist yet. So there aren't residents yet to consult with and so on. So I'm just wondering how we think we can align those sorts of things.
That, through chair, that is something that I think I would be looking to get some aviation expertise on. I'm sure we're not the first community to address this, have an issue like this to look at. So I know that in some communities, there are neighborhoods that are closer to airport developments have certain covenants registered on title and things like that. But that's, I think, something that we're looking for some aviation expertise support on.
So, Council, I've been racking my brain about this since we got our agenda. So I want to sort of put a proposal on the floor for your consideration. There's a couple of things that concern me. One is certainly the timeline. But the other is related to my first question that I asked Mr. Plum, which is, do we have best practices, and are we implementing those as the airport manager to the best of our ability? And so I think what I'd like to see is that the phase we undertake now is the current conditions around operations, regulatory governance, infrastructure, financial, and the best practices, investigation, around emergency response, aviation operations, safety management, noise and environment, land use, and regulatory policies. And then use 2022. So get that from the consultant, understand where we are and where best practices are, and use 2022 to implement some of those best practices within our existing leases, and address some of the complaints that we've been receiving and collect data. So when I look at what we're doing around neighborhood planning, we're not going out to people and saying, what do you want? We're putting in front of them technical reports and analysis and data, and then saying, now based on this data, what do you think it looks like? And I think it's dangerous for us to go out to the public in this very compressed timeline when we have other large engagements going on, where we're actually not even sitting at best practices yet in terms of managing the airport. And so why not give 2022 to do our homework, to start to implement some of those best practices based on the consultant's report that we would get early in the new year, and then collect the data we need in 2022 around air movements, around any environmental concerns that we have, around any increase or decrease in traffic when it's happening. We can do noise evaluations, and then do the engagement all in one fell swoop in 2023 when we can create the whole picture. And I don't think there's anything standing in our way of starting to create some more certainty for the tenants that are already there. I think we can do that through our existing leases. But to me, intuitively, it seems incorrect to try and push all of this through in the timeline we've got here without the data that we need, actually, I think, to show the community where the airport is at today in its current operations. And I think we could use 2022 to really put our best foot forward and manage the airport a little bit differently, a little bit better, and address some of the current complaints we already have. So that would be my recommendation, and I'll just sort of drop it out there to see if there's any reaction to that before I formulate a motion. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Mayor Elliott, I'm very sympathetic to your take on this and your reading of how we're going to manage a public engagement process. But I'm looking at the airport strategy timeline and schema that Mr. Plum has laid out for us. And your comments and concerns really relate to the top part of the, now I'm looking directly at the chart here, best practices operations management. I feel, however, that the other components of what we're going to try to achieve November, December 2021, which include infrastructure analysis, layout analysis, financial analysis, and economic development, should not wait. And they need not wait. And one of the reasons I say this is because they are not related to increased takeoffs and landings. They are not necessarily related to that. They are related to the opportunity to address opportunities in maintenance and servicing. Right now, we have a lot of takeoffs and landings of flights going for servicing at other airports. That's a fact. We don't have those services here, so they fly to Pemberton, they fly to Vernon or the Fraser Valley to get stuff done to their aircraft. So I guess what I'm saying is I think I do appreciate your comments and support them, but I think they only relate to they relate mostly to the operations management aspect of the chart of to-dos by November, December. I really feel that the infrastructure analysis, the layout analysis, and economic development scenarios, because they're not necessarily related to takeoffs and landings or increasing them, I think that they should not be delayed, and that the tenants there and the community economic development stake is too important to have these delayed. But I am sympathetic to a careful implementation of what we learn about operations management. Thank you.
Councillor French, then Councillor Herford.
Thanks, Mayor. I agree with the comments of the colleagues on both sides of me. And I think when I look at the tables that have been presented to us that we've been referring to, the one that really jumps out at me is the blue background, community engagement, where we're focused on noise and support for future expansion. I agree that the timing of what we see here is not great. I'd like to see a longer engagement period, and I would like to see it moved out to 2022. So of everything that I see in this report, I'm very happy with all of it, but for this one box about community engagement and the timing of that. I'd like to see it pushed into the new year, and I'd like to see us spend more time on it than what's suggested here.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. It's been so long that this has been an issue up there, and understandably the long-term plans haven't been put in place because we're on some levels. I think everyone is waiting for the silver bullet, which we've been presented here. So but I don't want to move. So I'm eager to move quickly on this so that we can get to where we want to be. I do think that having something like a recommendation for a final report, I'm sure is going to come with budget ask, and I'd love to see this included in 2023 budgeting. So I'm worried if we push it out too far that that we sort of 3 months equals a year in 3 months or something like that. So I'd like to have this. I do think we need to move swiftly, but not at the expense of that community. We need to have a layer there of community engagement as well, so that we can have heard the current conditions, and then the final report in my mind is sort of the answer to and painting the future that could be with investments or future tenancy or restrictions or whatever that may be. So I'm still I'm probably somewhere between what's proposed and where the mayor and the mayor's proposal, unless I can hear what I'm looking for is how we line it up with that budget cycle, or maybe staff's perception of that.
Councillor Race.
Thank you. And so when I look at the proposed recommendation, I'm prepared to decide now on the first part of it, which is the endorsement of the debris flow study and the safety issue. And that, I think, allows staff to start considering the process for subdivision, which is the key to the long-term lease issue, and what might be required. I mean, I think of discussions I've had since I've been on council, and at one time there was a significant issue around whether or not we could even put a water line up there because it's quite distant from other services, and I'm not even sure if that's the case anymore, but there are certainly servicing requirements and how we would divide up the lots and so forth. And I think it's partly, from my perspective, it's a matter of keeping faith with the tenants who are up there and letting them know that we are actually moving this forward. But the other aspect of it is the question of, as I stated a minute ago, is the appetite for expansion. And I don't think we can even ask the public to consider that unless we can tell them that we're doing as well as we can do at this airport. And so I think the best practices and ensuring that we have the best practices available and the best solutions for them is a critical component to even starting the public engagement process, so that people know what they might get. If we think we can cure some things that are sort of an irritant to some people, would that affect their decision on whether or not we would expand the airport, for example? So before we go down that road, I think we do have to make sure that our house is in order and start the best practices review. And frankly, I'm not in a hurry. I mean, I'd like to see this thing start moving, and that's why I suggest we can start thinking about the subdivision issue now. But as far as the strategy goes, that's a big question. I don't think there's any doubt about it. It will get a lot of people quite interested in this issue from a lot of different directions and perspectives. And so I think before we embark in that, to me, it's just not even thinkable that we get it done by next spring in any significant form. I think we're well into 2023, and I think we'd be lucky if we had an answer at the end of that year, actually, to some of these questions. So I think start moving on it, absolutely. I'm prepared to make the decision on the safety issue. And then I think I would want to embark on the best practices discussion, as the mayor described.
All right. So why don't we do this? That the District of Squamish endorse the geotechnical analysis for the Squamish Airport provided by BGC Engineering and the Chikai Fan long-term airport development policy attached to the report from Corporate Services dated November 2nd. It's moved by Councillor Hertford, seconded by Councillor French. Any comments on the engineering report? I don't see any hands. Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. For the second part, Mr. Plum?
Yeah, I'd just like to propose something to council as I'm listening to everything that's going on, and this is a really great discussion. And so I'm looking at what I heard from all of you, and one thing I just want to maybe put out there for consideration is that what we can do is move forward the current conditions analysis. We could move forward the best practices operations analysis. There could be some community engagement, I think I've heard around the current conditions. At this point in time, some engagement around that and potentially around noise and things. The best practice operations management, we can bring in the consultant to help with that as well. The infrastructure analysis, the layout analysis, that's going to be staff supported as well. So that's something I think we can move forward. And the financial analysis around, what kind of infrastructure may we need at that airport just to have a basic airport, and how much does it cost, and how we maybe fund that. That's something I think we can continue to move forward, which again doesn't really, it's more nuts and bolts kind of work. And then I do agree wholeheartedly that, as I'm listening to you speak, and that, when we do go to the community for engagement on this, it's really critical that we go to them with the right information. And I think having done all of this background work would really enhance that in community engagement campaign that could then help decide, those bigger discussions that could happen in future decisions that might happen in, going into 2023. But we could use 2022 to do all this other work, which is not, time lost by any stretch. And it's going to put us in a position to do a better community engagement at the end when we start to have to make some bigger decisions. And it's going to allow us still to move forward really important elements that could be a factor in decisions around long-term leases, like, infrastructure and funding and potential layout of the airport based on the geotech analysis as well. And I think part of this as well is that the ability to even expand the airport is going to be somewhat constrained and limited by the geotech. Like, the geotech didn't come out and say the whole airport's wide open. It said there's certain areas that are safer to build on than others. And that's, I think that's something that we need to sit down with a staff and a consultant and Mr. Wolfson and I and figure out what does that mean for the future. So I think what I'm hearing actually with all these comments is a way to tweak this to go forward. So I just wanted to share that with council that, moving the current conditions and the best practices of operations and the infrastructure layout and financial analysis could still continue and put us in a position where we could do, the best community engagement at a later date around bigger decisions that could be laying down the road. And sorry, we can take that time and we can work in the meantime with the best practices recommendations that come from the consultant. We can try and implement as much of that as we can based on, the funding and options that are available at the time.
Councillor Pengel?
Yeah, Mr. Plum, I just want to, to me, it makes intuitive sense to start with current conditions, best practices, those two pieces. And then it seems with that in hand, that will significantly inform community engagement, but also leaseholder engagement about, what can they actually do. And then for me, the layout, infrastructure analysis, financial and economic development, community engagement, it seems almost like that could be an iterative process, endless in theory. We probably wouldn't want to do it endlessly, but is it safe to assume that, once the current conditions and best practices are going, there might be a little bit of stuff being done in parallel and feeding back into each other, and it might not be just there's one chance to do each of those and that's it, and then we move on.
Right.
So Mr. Plum, it's not generally best practice to make up a consulting contract on the fly at a council meeting, but what I'm generally hearing is support for creating some certainty in the short term for tenants, existing tenants, support for understanding and moving forward with best practices around operations and management, as you've outlined. But perhaps bringing back a different phased approach to council for consideration at a future agenda that would, I think this deserves fulsome engagement. I don't think we'll be there in 2022, but I do think there's a lot of work we can do in 22 that gets us there. So is the best course of action right now is to send this second part around the airport strategy back to staff for reconsideration based on council's comments this evening.
Through you, Chair, I'm open to that and welcome that.
So council, I'd like to move that the airport strategy phasing be returned to staff for reconsideration based on council's comments at the regular meeting of November 2nd. Seconded by Councillor Race. Any further comments? Councillor Anderson.
Yes, just very general ones. In 1996, the municipal election was dominated by airport controversy. And the controversy was around proposals from an out-of-town, in fact, out-of-country operators. And some of the local people knowledgeable and experienced with the airport pointed out even then that the proposal to land Dash 7s and Dash 8s on scheduled flights at Squamish really wasn't a well-baked business plan to begin with. In fact, it logistically wasn't really practical. But nonetheless, a lot of controversy came out of it, and controversy around airport uses continue to this day, and we need to address them. But we have also lost a lot of service jobs to other communities, businesses that just grew impatient with us and took their business elsewhere. And these were businesses that did not involve extra takeoffs and landings. I think that I'm happy to see that the staff report has highlighted a passage from the official community plan regarding sub-area planning for the Kachika-Ifan, and I'll cite it. Employment, and this is section 1114I. Employment lands opportunities, including opportunities associated with the airport, and that is that there's other opportunities not in the aviation related also on airport lands, and they occur now. I think these are important to consider as we go forward, and we can hear back again from staff. We have some very well-defined proposals for uses of airport lands in the airport reserve, and they involve greenhouses, they involve wood waste handling, and they involve other forest industry uses, very well defined. They're not difficult to map out and touch base on, but we're not ready for them. So I'm happy to see that the consideration is there in the staff report, that these can be considered, and I believe they should be. I would also like to point out that one of the issues for the airport, and we've just discussed it previously during our council term, is governance and how to address airport manager, how to pay for an airport manager, what about an advisory structure, and so on. We are dealing with this in Squamish Harbor as well, and over the next year, hopefully not longer, we're going to be addressing governance of our harbor within the Marine Action Strategy. And I suggest that it will be of interest to compare notes between the two projects. After all, in Washington State, there are about 16 airports that are managed together with port authorities, if I'm not mistaken. Quite a number of port authorities in Washington State also manage airports. And they do this for efficiency, shared office, and this sort of thing. But I think that there are parallels and things to learn from between our waterfront and the airport about how we bring in, how we pay for a manager, with fees, how we structure an advisory process, how we make this efficient for everyone and responsive to everyone. So there's some parallel things to watch for also in our waterfront. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be supporting the motion. Initially my preference was to get going on a piece of this, but given it's such a complex issue and the phasing needs to be pulled apart, I think this is a good course of action right now. However, given that we were looking at a initial proposal that was going to see us a final report in January, I hope that we can find room on a council agenda prior to that to discuss the phasing of this further. But I'll leave it there.
Councillor French, Councillor Pettengill.
Speaking in favor of the motion, I'm tempted to carry the torch further, the historical torch further that Councillor Anderson has lit. This airport is part of a bigger region, and probably many people don't know that after the -8, -7 proposal in Squamish clearly was dead, then Mayor of Whistler, Ted Nebling, had a grand vision for creating a Whistler International Airport by filling in a bunch of ponds and lakes in the current turnoff to the Callahan Valley, as Pemberton was contemplating its own future airport. Well, Nebling's plan never came to fruition. It was going to have way too significant of an environmental impact. So I think that where I'm going with this is we've been having this conversation for a long time, and to take a little bit more time with the consultation is the appropriate thing to do here. And I'm supporting the motion because I think that this consultation process that we're about to engage in is very important. It cannot be rushed. And we can't get to the end of that consultation period and have hundreds or thousands of people saying we didn't give them an opportunity to hear their voice. I support the motion.
Councillor Beck, go.
Yeah, I wasn't here when the last engagement around the airport, contentious engagement occurred, but just, listening to the news, it's quite clear that airports can be flashpoints. So I think it's important to have a very well-informed public discussion about what the future should hold here. And so I think the plan we're talking about makes sense. The only hesitation, and it was brought up a little bit, that I have in moving too slowly is just as wildfires increase, and having participated in some of the emergency exercises, thinking about the emergency value of that airport and knowing that right now taxpayers are not funding the airport. It is being supported by the operations there. So, wanting to be cautious about not losing that situation, which I think in general is positive for our safety. So that's the one thing I want to be cautious about, going too slow. But I think the attention to detail and consultation and plan that's being discussed is overall well warranted here. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Plum. We'll look forward to seeing you back here shortly.
All right, thank you, Council.
Council, can we push through? Okay. We're on to item 9.2, amendment to electronic participation at council meetings policy. This is to align the policy with the bylaw changes. Ms. Pollock. Do we need the slides, Ms. Pollock, or can you just, we've read the report, so why don't we just walk through it?
I can do that. It was a very short presentation. So the purpose of the amendment to the electronic participation at council meetings policy is to align the recent amendments to the procedure bylaw regarding electronic meetings and electronic participation by the public. The purpose of the policy in general is to provide clear instructions for members of council and the public when participating electronically. So the policy was originally approved by council in June 2019, and the recent amendment to align with the changes to the procedure bylaw basically were made throughout the policy, and details were added to the policy around electronic public participation and public hearings, which is new to the bylaw and the policy. And next steps, if the policy amendment is approved, the policy will be replaced on the district website and a link will be included on the view or participate in a council meeting section of the website. And the staff recommendation is that the amended electronic participation at council meetings policy as presented at the November 2nd, 2021 regular council meeting be approved.
Any questions for Ms. Pollock? Councilor Rice, moving that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Hertford. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, Council, we're on to the consent agenda. Anything that presents a conflict of interest for you or any items that you wish to debate or vote on, they need to be removed from the consent agenda at this time. I will be removing the special business meeting minutes from October 26th to clarify some motions I put forward. Anything else? Seeing none, does someone want to move the consent agenda? Moved by Councilor Pettengill, seconded by Councilor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. There are no late agenda items, so we're moving on to correspondence. Action requested that correspondence regarding off-leash dogs be referred to staff. There's several of those. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by me. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. We had a letter from T. Clifford, Provincial President for the Ambulance Paramedics Initiative and Solutions, for an invitation to present to Council on what we should be considering in terms of our advocacy to the province on ambulance service. So this is for Council consideration if we would like to invite them to present at a committee of the whole, given the changes. Councilor Hertford?
Yeah, I'd move that we accept their invitation or their offer to appear. How's that?
Great. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councilor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Correspondence received from Kay Jackson regarding Air Drive be referred to staff. Councilor Rice, you're moving that? Is there a seconder? Councilor Hertford seconds. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a correspondence from Jay Batt regarding speeding downtown, and that be referred to the engineering department for investigation and response. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Hertford. Any opposed? Motion carries. That correspondence received from M. Johnston regarding North Shore Connects, our regional transit, be referred to the engineering department for investigation and response. Councilor Anderson.
Mayor Elliott, I'd like to suggest an amended motion that this correspondence from Malcolm Johnson be referred to the engineering department for information. And I'll speak to that if I have a seconder.
I'll second that.
Mayor Elliott, I believe that this has some interesting concepts outlined regarding future rail transportation between Squamish and, in fact, indeed all the way up to the East Fraser Valley. However, We have a local resource on this topic, namely the West Coast Railway Association. And 3 years ago, the Chamber of Commerce engaged with the West Coast Railway Association to put together a briefing note regarding rail transportation and ferries. And I feel that we have far superior and nuanced and expert information available here locally to engage with, and that this report does not merit in its comments regarding or relevant to Squamish investigation and response, but simply for information.
Thank you. Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Correspondence from M. Sharp about the sidewalk, Government Road, that it be referred to staff. And I would also amend that to say, and for response in advising the folks who have asked for a sidewalk on Government Road to participate in the Let's Talk Squamish budget discussion, where they can ask their question and get an answer. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. That correspondence received from T. Algar regarding fireworks and other such explosives be referred to staff. Moved by Councillor Hertford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. That correspondence received from D. Lowe regarding needed improvements to Loggers Lane boat ramp be referred to staff. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Race. Councillor Race.
And I will just make the quick comment that I think a lot of people in the public don't know or realize that that boat ramp is not a municipal asset. It's on private land, and the municipality really has no, at the moment, direct role to play in that. But it will refer to staff.
I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Shar, where am I doing my minutes that I pulled? Okay, so under approval of minutes, recommendations from Committee of the Whole, October 26th, the District of Squamish accept the Public Safety Services Review for information. Moved by Council French, seconded by Council Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then all the motions regarding the 55 Recreation and Culture Programming, some engagement summary report. There's several that's under there. Moved by Councillor Hertford, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Councillor Anderson, you wish to comment?
Yes, Mayor Elliott, I feel obliged to clarify something in my own statements on that evening. Or was it evening? I can't remember now. I was referring quite a few times to a 2012 collaboration agreement. I was mistaken. The date for it was 2015. I feel it is important that I just make that clear. That was an error on my part. I had to dig deep to find the report, and I didn't manage to do it before the meeting. It was a 2015 Recreation Services and Squamish Senior Society collaboration agreement. Thank you.
Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the motions related to the community grant policy amendments and community events update will be approved. Moved by Councillor Hertford, seconded by Councillor French. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. And that staff add funds to the 2022, that should read 2022 to 2020. Oh, sorry, staff add funds to 2023 and 2026 budget for conduct of fulsome status updates regarding the Community Climate Action Plan. Moved by Councillor Hertford, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. I pulled the minutes for October 26th. Because I put forward a couple of motions and I'm not sure that they were captured accurately. So there was one that staff bring back. The minutes read a placekeeper for the Arts Council storage and event management space. And I had said that staff bring back a plan for the Arts Council storage and event management space in Junction Park prior to and the wording in the minute said demotion, but it's demolition of the current space. So I just wanted to put forward that amendment as well as with regard to the motion of the fleet master plan, it should read that a review of the fleet master plan with a climate lens be referred to the 2023 budget. It just said that the fleet master plan with a climate lens be referred. So I just wanted to say the review part. So if I'll move those two amendments to the minutes, if there's a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we have advisory design panel minutes from October 21st, 2021 to receive. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. Council staff in-camera announcements. We have one this evening that the Squamish Library Board members, the following Squamish Library Board members be appointed to the Squamish Library Board for a 2-year term ending December 2023. Esther DeVos, Christine Baker, Janet Jameson, Molly Loudon, and that Adriana Suarez Gonzalez be appointed to the Squamish Library Board to fill the remainder of a 2-year term ending December 2022. Thank you to those citizens for serving our community in this capacity. Any unscheduled public attendance? No, we did that. Open question period? Anybody online? No. Councillor staff announcements. Councillor Pettengill.
Just one quick one I can think of. Last week, Councillor French and I had hosted coffee with a councillor at Zephyr Cafe. Had a few people come out and some really good conversations. And I think there's a few other ones coming up that are on the district website. So check those out. They're well worthwhile. And it's nice to be back meeting with people again in person.
Councillor Race.
On that point, I am one of the two, and I can't remember who I'm with, meeting Councillor Anderson, 8 o'clock in the morning at the Ledge. Thursday. This coming Thursday.
Super. I realized that Councillor Pettengill and I did not coordinate our update from the SLRD. So we'll have to do that next time. Because I can't remember right now. I'm too tired. So, but council will bring that back to you next time. Anything else? All right, seeing none, motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, staff, and good night.